You are now listening to the Region Free Gamers Podcast.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Region Free Gamers Podcast, the podcast that is fluent in the universal language of gaming. My name is Ozzy Garcia, and I will be your host for this fine episode. And as usual, before we get into our episode proper, we would like to ask you that if you like what you hear in the show, make sure to spread the word to friends and families, your granny, your aunts, uncles, etc., everyone that will be interested in listening. And more importantly, as we like to say, do a pile drive slam on that subscribe button on iTunes or any other podcast listening platform of choice. We would also appreciate if you could leave us a review on iTunes, which is absolutely the best way to get our show into the ears of many more people. And with that said, let me introduce my awesome co-host. So joining us remotely through the wonders of modern technology is our very own Canadian Bear Grylls, Paul Ramallo.
Hi-oh.
And actually sitting right next to me, only for the second time on the show. He has not been right next to me since our party episode way back on episode 5. Jesus. And this is our dear Puerto Rican friend, Arnaldo Paris. How are you, man?
I'm doing pretty good, but I feel like awesome is a very strong qualifier.
We have to fluff ourselves up.
Bars have been set now.
And also sitting right next to me is a very special guest. This is going to be the first episode that we do something like this, so we're very excited. He's the author of the book, The Minds Behind the Games, in which he interviews a bunch of cult and classic video game developers about the games they worked on. And he's also the founder and editor in-chief of ReviewFix.com. And he also is much more professional than us because he's a lecturer, actually, in English and journalism in the Kingsborough Community College in Brooklyn, New York. So he actually was able to join us because I also happen to be in Brooklyn. So he only took a short bus ride away over to our house, and he saw exactly what he was getting, and he didn't like it.
Too late now.
And without further ado, we would like to introduce Patrick Hickey Jr. to the podcast. So, Patrick, thank you so much for agreeing to join our little podcast.
Thank you for allowing me to come on your wonderful establishment. So the musk in here is very good.
Yes. As is typical of any podcast of renown, you need to have some stale musk. So I'm glad that you appreciate the finer things in podcasting.
And as soon as I saw your apartment building, I put my knife away.
I'd just like to say that as professional podcasters, which you can tell that we actually are, we like to keep it a brisk 85 degrees in here at all time. It's the only way to live.
It's really the only way. I mean,
I'm a big fan of that Little John song and the sweat. From
Yes. Little John, a very, very, very appreciated friend of the podcast, as is Shaquille O'Neal.
So to answer your question, how did I start doing this? I found out my wife was pregnant. And she was about 5 months pregnant, and she was coming home from work, and she was exhausted. So it was like, she'd come home from work at 7 o'clock, I'd massage her feet, she'd eat, and then she'd go to bed. So I'm sitting on the couch with the cat and the dog, and I'm like, what the hell am I supposed to do? So at that point I was a journalist for over a decade and interviewed a ton of developers and stuff like that. And I was like, I wanted to be one of those people that when they had a kid wasn't I could have been whatever I wanted, and then I had you.
You
just ruined my life, you little offspring piece of garbage.
Exactly.
Damn kids.
And
that's why Paul decides he's never going to have kids.
I'm telling you.
It's like, no one's ruining my adventures in the Canadian wilderness.
So many people do that, though. And they do it subconsciously, or or sometimes they do it out loud. So, I was an editor at NBC for 2.5 years, and I had a ton of fun there. I covered 2 Olympic Games. I covered presidential election.
That's awesome,
covered 2 WrestleManias, 2.5 seasons of Saturday Night Live.
Much more important than any presidential election, WrestleMania.
Absolutely. They flew me out to cover SummerSlam one year.
Oh, that's awesome.
I covered 2 years of EA releases, FIFA, NCAA football,
that's
NHL.
awesome.
So I did a lot of cool stuff, but I'm just if you write for the internet for a long enough time, your work starts to disappear.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's I was, at one time I was the most read journalist on Examiner.com.
Okay.
For a month.
Mm-hmm.
and my stuff was getting millions of views on Examiner, and then just one day Examiner emails me and it's just like, oh, the site's going out of business. It's been bought by Access.
I remember. Yeah.
And all those articles were gone.
Yeah, it's the same thing that happened with OneUp.com.
Yeah, with OneUp.
Editors like Jeremy Parrish, Bob Mackey, etc., of Retronauts, all of that work. I mean, 10 plus years of work just gone down the drain.
So for me, it was only like 4, but I was still pissed.
But the only way you could find those articles are on like Wayback Machine, which is not great.
Yeah.
And so
the formatting is
it's so ephemeral. Like, people don't realize how ephemeral what you write on the internet is. And that's something that we're learning as this technology develops and as we have more experience with it and websites come and go. I mean, there are so many websites, let's say from the .com bubble, that just completely went out of business. So if you wanted to go back and try to recreate history and archive that history of what happened during that time period, which is so important to the world, culturally relevant, you wouldn't be able to, because a lot of it has just disappeared with servers gone and everything. So you start realizing this, and I think it's something that we're starting to pick up a lot more on, which is that the internet is not going to preserve it forever. People like to say that what you put on the internet stays there forever. Not necessarily.
Not if it's useful.
Unless you touch small children, then
if you touch small children, that will stay there.
Which I do not do.
And we do not condone.
So I was just like, how do I preserve like the type of work that I really want to do?
Yeah.
So I just said, I think I should write a book. So I went in my man cave and I just started pulling games off of the shelf.
Yes.
So like Mutant League Football was one, Toe Jam and Earl, King's Bounty, E.T.
Yes.
And I just started reaching out to these developers.
And that's one of the things that I've realized, especially now that we're doing a podcast, it's that it's a lot easier to reach out to developers than you think. The real hard work is trying to find how to contact them and then getting them to say yes. But they're out there, and some of them are not even involved in gaming anymore, and so they may have a LinkedIn page, etc. And so
those are the best ones to talk to, because they'll tell you more than the ones that are still in the video game industry.
Exactly, because those in the video game industry, they may not want to talk about prior experiences. They may not want to get in trouble with their current employer, etc. So
I just interviewed a developer like 2 days ago for 10 Pin Alley for the sports edition of The Minds Behind the Games. That's the third book. And he's at Rockstar right now.
Awesome.
He's done character animations.
Was he the one that did table tennis as well?
No, it's another developer. I love that game. Rockstar Table Tennis is
that game is awesome.
And,
dude, that game is highly underrated.
It's very underrated. You can get it like CO for $3 nowadays.
I know.
Yes.
He's an artist now, and he's the 8-bit cubist on Twitter. That's his name. And I just bought a sweet shirt. He bought my book, and I felt like, you had to do the right thing. He bought a book off of me, so I bought a shirt off of him.
Yeah.
So it's like Run DMC, but instead of DMC, it's GME. But it's like in pixels. It's really nice.
Yeah.
So I bought that off him. But the guy that did 10 Pin Alley is like, I'll tell you whatever you want to hear about 10 Pin Alley, but
nothing about
anything
Rockstar.
about Rockstar.
Yeah.
But like I interviewed Lee Perry, and he was the lead level designer for Gears of War.
Yeah.
And he told me some stuff that when it was finished, I was just like, wow, like holy crap, you know? Like I felt like, because
it gives you a lot of newfound appreciation for the game and everything that went into it,
and
the hard
thing is,
work.
Too, how many interviews are there with Gears of War people? They don't do a lot.
I mean, it would be like Cliff Lesinski and stuff like that, because he's kind of the main guy.
The big guy.
And that's the thing. A lot of the times you just get the face, the marketing face.
And there's other people.
And there are other people that actually... And these other people, they may be the hard workers that are toiling away incognito. And they may be the ones to tell you another side of the story. They may say, look, they may say this, but this is actually what happened. And it was a little bit harder to do this.
Too, that like you do an interview with like the main creator of something, and they tell you that they haven't said 1,000 times.
Yeah, exactly.
So like I in the adventure book that's coming out this fall, I interviewed Chris Seaver, who did Conker's Bad Fur Day.
Yeah.
He gave me so much that we had to do a separate interview for Live and Reloaded.
Where's he at now?
What?
Where's he at now?
He's still
a Rare?
What? No. Oh, you meant no. He has his own indie company.
Oh, really?
He just did this indie game called a Rusty. It's called Rusty Pup: The Legend of Rusty Pup.
No,
it's actually really good.
Yeah.
It's really cool. And it's supposed to be like the spiritual successor.
Is it as R-rated as Conker's Bad Fur Day?
Yeah, it's got great freaking music. It's
Conker's Bad Fur Day has one of the most underrated soundtracks of the Rare canon.
We'll put it this way: it's different.
Yeah.
It's not Conker, but it's very different. I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah.
But he was just so shooting
I find
about Microsoft.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Just like, yo, for real? Like he was.
There are a lot of post-mortems. Well, I don't want to call it mortem because Rare is still alive, but there are a lot of dissections and analysis of what happened at Rare and how did Rare change after.
He talks about it.
After the brothers left the company and Microsoft bought it.
He talks about it.
So there was a whole understanding that there was a change in culture. It's the same thing.
He's so funny.
It's the same thing that happened with Lionhead Studios, etc. That Peter Molyneux founded and then Microsoft bought them. So it's interesting. I don't necessarily want to hear a developer just pile on another publisher, another company. But it's good to hear the straight story.
It's like I'll give you an example. So Mark Flipman, who was a producer at Acclaim during the late 80s, early 90s, he did all the WWF games, Maximum Carnage, Terminator 2. He bought the first book off me, and he read the E.T. chapter, and he goes, "You were super fair to E.T." He goes, "I wasn't expecting that." He goes, "That was the first chapter that I went to." He goes, "Because I was expecting you to like just bash on E.T.
Well, now there's even a documentary out there for E.T., and it's just gotten this completely legendary status as a horrible garbage. And it's good to hear another side of the story.
That's my goal, though, because it's like I said it in the introduction to the book that like no one cares what I think of the game.
Yeah. It's not about what you think.
You want to hear the story. And we talked about this before the show. There's just so many game books out there where it's just all someone's opinion. And it's like, listen, if you want to spew your opinion, go start a YouTube show.
Exactly.
I feel like my book right now is in over 70 libraries around the world because I feel like I took the initiative to allow these developers to tell their story instead of me going, "Oh, AT sucks," which I don't think it sucks. But
no, I disagree. I had the unfortunate circumstance when I was a kid of playing ET.
I don't think it's great. But okay. I think it's playable. For a 5-week game, it's absolutely playable.
That's the thing, right? And that's what I found really interesting was because, like I said, I played ET as a kid. Like, I had a buddy who had a 2600, and we loved Yar's Revenge.
Yeah, Yar's is awesome.
And, and there were a few other games that were less memorable. But ET, we were playing it, and we were like, this is horrendous. Like, and just reading through your book, they're talking about how bad the collision detection was. And that made
I think that was the big
sense.
issue.
Well, the thing is, too, there's no instruction manual.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We had no idea what to do. It was insane.
Atari just, in the Atari Game Over documentary, I think it's Nolan Bushnell, he said, Atari wasn't killed, it committed, suicide. And it's just you make, they made, 8 million copies or something like that of E.T., so they had to sell the 8 million. Up to that point, only one game that sold that many copies. It was Pac-Man on the Atari.
Well, you had to think about the install base at the time. I mean, were there even 8 million people that would buy this?
No, there were.
I mean, there may have been people with the console, but you're assuming pretty much a 50, 60%, 70% attach rate.
Too. I just interviewed Rebecca Heineman, and she's a legend.
Yeah, she's super legend. Yeah.
And she was telling me one of the problems with the 3DO.
A wizard of coding.
Yeah.
This woman was just
porters.
She did the Jaguar port. The Jaguar port for Doom, was it?
Yep, and she did Wolfenstein on the Mac and on the 3DO.
Yeah, just absolutely legendary.
And she said the problem with the 3DO version was she thought it was one of the best versions that she ever did of Wolfenstein, but there was only 250,000 3DOs out there. Yeah. And the thing is, a mega hit game only has 10% market penetration.
Yeah.
So you're saying if you have 250,000 consoles,
you're only going to sell a few of those.
25,000 copies.
Yeah.
So where's the money?
It's impossible.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, I'm glad that you said Rebecca Heineman because she's absolutely
I love her.
Great.
She's great.
She did the SNES port of Doom.
Yeah.
Which it's Doom. It's running. Yeah. It's Doom. It's running. It's not the version that you would play now, but for the time to get Doom running on a Super Nintendo without the Super Effects chip.
Yep.
That's incredibly impressive.
Even though it's not the best version of Doom, it's probably the first version of Doom that millions of people have played.
And absolutely.
Weren't turned off enough by it to not play the next game. So that's your job is porting.
It created a fan base. It created a built-in audience.
But she's not Romero or Carmack, so no one knows who the hell she is.
And that's the thing also that you start realizing this as you start interviewing developers, that there are always the ones that are marketing savvy, and they're always the ones that know how to market themselves. The Romeros, for example, and
we'll talk about them later.
Everyone else just kind of falls by the wayside. And I think it's important to just say, that this is something done by many people.
Sure.
Back in the day, it may have been 4, 5, 6. Yeah. Nowadays, we're talking about teams of 700.
Yeah, sure.
And, a Rockstar game, that's done by 700, 800 people. Yep. An Assassin's Creed game is done by 800 people.
Yep.
So how many of those people are able to tell the story? And how many of those people maybe inserted, let's say in an Assassin's Creed game, an animation that you may never notice, but that brings the world to life and gives that extra razzle dazzle that makes it believable.
Well, as a journalist, as an interviewer, like, I feel like when you see, oh, this is a team of 500 people, it's like, well, that's 500 different stories.
Yeah.
None of these, no two people on this team are going to have the exact same story. So it's always, I really enjoyed what you were talking about before, where it's like, for me, at least, because I also interview people in my line of work, and for me, the best interviews are the ones where I go in and I think I'm going to get one thing, and I end up coming out with a completely different thing.
That's the thing that I've learned over the years, because like now I've been doing this for 15 years, that like I try not to even go in with any expectations. With any expectations. It's funny too, because one of the games that's in the adventure book is Family Guy on the PS2.
Yeah, a game that was very critically panned.
So, but the thing is, if you speak to one producer, he'll tell you one thing, and if you speak to another producer, he'll more like toe the company line.
Yeah,
and it just made, because like everyone.
So you had to know how to sift through it in order to get the full story.
Yes.
And you may get different angles of the story,
Absolutely.
and the two sides may get to the whole.
Yes. So
or maybe not the whole, but just close to the whole.
That's what ended up happening with Family Guy. It's like probably one of my favorite chapters in the second book.
Yeah. That's amazing, because that's not a game that anyone will talk about.
It could have been so good too.
Yeah, but no one will talk about it. And there are, particularly in the PS2 era, the PS2 era had so many games that no one is ever going to talk about. I mean, there are going to be people interviewing Insomniac for Ratchet and Clank. There are going to be people interviewing Naughty Dog for Jack and Daxter games, etc. But no one's going to be talking, let's say, let me just pick one right off the shelf. Summoner 2. No one's going to talk about Test Drive for the PS2, etc. So it's good to just be able to give a platform for these developers that toiled away and gave their life, gave a year, 2, 3 years of their life in order to make this. And as soon as it came into market, that's it. Either it sold well or it didn't sell well, but it was it.
I speak to so many developers now, like on Facebook, and they'll say things like, you see one of the games that you spent all this time on, and it's like $7.99 now, and you're just like, oh my god!
Yeah, it tears you away. It tears you away because you know how much time you put into that, and it's
you
like
could be in Starbucks and be right next to them, and you play their game for hundreds of hours, and you have no idea who they are.
And from a psychological perspective, you mentioned a very interesting point, which is, how does it feel to see that the thing that you valued and you put so much effort into is just the societal value ascribed to it is $7? That from a psychological perspective must be devastating.
I kind of think the opposite might even be more interesting, where like I think of how would a developer feel if, like, I don't know, like they worked on a game, it might not be a great game, but it's rare now, and it's 1,200. Like, how does the guy who like worked on Little Samson feel about the fact that like that game's insanely...
Well, they probably don't even know that it's insanely old because they're in Japan.
He's probably like, what are these people thinking? Like, this is...
I mean, this is like a microcosm of that. The other day I was on Amazon, and like my book's $40, and people are selling it for over 100.
Yeah. Oh, really?
I'm like, what? Like, no.
That's what I'm saying.
Like, you can just get it somewhere.
Don't pay $100 for the book.
Don't do that.
No, I'll sell it to you for, I'll sell it to you for 40. I'll sneak in like a Cecil Fielder card or something like that.
But I find it very interesting that it's kind of like we're going back in time, where at a moment in time in the 90s and the 2000s, we thought everything is going to be digital. And now we're realizing we need to put this on paper.
Oh, yeah.
We need to actually... I mean, we're not going back to the times of papyrus or anything,
you guys
but...
have heard about what's going on with Square, that they've lost some of the code.
Absolutely. And and I think that it's good that now this has become a topic of conversation. I think that there are a lot more people nowadays, and people like Frank Cifaldi, etc., that are doing a lot of work in order to preserve the ephemera of gaming, which is very important. But I believe ultimately, when you have something... stories and memories, you need to put that down. How do you capture memories in any other form except to just orally say it? And that's the oldest tradition. That's the oldest form of human communication. And I think we still need to preserve that. So to have your book in the Library of Congress, it shows that it doesn't matter if in 1,000 years we're no longer around. If there happens to be a Library of Congress remaining, we're going to be able to access this information. Sure. It's the same reasoning that the Library of Alexandria existed. We needed to preserve this knowledge.
To becoming a Highlander.
Yes. And then that's also part of it. You need to become immortal. So,
I mean, that's ultimately like the reason. You know?
That would be my reason.
My main goal is for my daughter to just be like, my dad is a lot cooler than your dad. You know?
And I don't want it to get too personal, but I will talk about this. I was recently on a family trip. I grew up in Cuba, as I mentioned in the podcast, and my grandfather died it's going to be 2 years now.
Sorry.
And he left behind, for the last, let's say, 15 years of his life, all he wrote was poetry.
Wow.
And he was always writing. If you saw him on the desk, he lost his right arm when he was 29. And so he had to learn how to write all over again with his left hand.
Yeah.
And once he started writing again, it's like his world just completely opened up.
Sure.
And so for the last 15 years of his life, he just wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. And so I went back to Cuba and I picked up some of his writings, which was like a whole box full of writings.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started reading it, it was like my grandfather was speaking to me from beyond the grave.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It was like he was just telling me, it was like a diary, a living diary of, from one point he's talking about how much he appreciated and loved my grandmother. And then on the next, he's just speaking about how much he loves coffee. And it was just such a poignant moment, which I think really highlights the importance of putting writings down.
Absolutely.
And for your children, for your grandchildren to know that you put this down. And Paul and I were talking about this before the podcast. We really appreciate and we value people that just go out there and do it.
Yeah, there's so many people out there that just, they talk and talk.
Yeah, it's like, I want to do this or I want to do that.
It drives me crazy.
And that's the thing also as well, that right now you have something like YouTube, and there are some good people doing stuff on YouTube, but a lot of people are toiling away in obscurity because there's just so much chaff out there. There's just so many people that are just doing Let's Plays or doing a commentary that, as you say, is just reading off
people
of Wikipedia.
Would just rather watch Markiplier flip out.
Exactly. And so when you put down a book actually requires a lot of effort.
Yeah.
And it actually requires editorial skills and talent. And so YouTube, you require talent. I mean, I'm not going to argue against that.
Like that,
but it's a lot, there's a higher barrier of entry to creating a book. And so what you tend to get more higher quality.
Absolutely.
Nowadays, there's also digital distribution, so that might lower the barrier a little bit. But, people like Boss Fight Books, they're doing some great stuff.
That was one of the reasons why, too, that I decided not to self-publish, that I decided to go to a publisher that's been around for 40 years.
Because you wanted that credibility as well. So, in any case, let's take a quick break so that we can get into a little bit more on the questions for Patrick, and we'll be back in a moment. All right, so we're back, and we're here again with Patrick Hickey Jr. He's the author behind the minds behind the games, and we've already learned a ton of information that we feel very privileged to get to know, so we're very happy to have Patrick on. So, Patrick, let's just get on the Wayback Machine.
Sure.
Let's just, click all the different gears and levers, and take us back to your very first experience with gaming. What's the first game you remember playing?
I was born in 1983, so I think it's a safe bet to say that it was probably Super Mario Brothers Duck Hunt.
Yes, and that's the same for me.
But the first game that I can say that I actively remember being engrossed in was probably RBI Baseball on the NES.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
I'm a huge sports fan.
Yeah.
My dad used to basically use me as a parlor trick. He would be watching a baseball game and with his friends in the house, and he would be like, PJ, that's my nickname. Like, PJ, come here. And I would walk out into the living room, and he would go, what's Kevin McReynolds' batting average with runners in scoring position against left-handed pitching? And this is 1988, 1989. And
yeah, you didn't really have access to Fangraphs or
none of that stuff was out.
Nothing like that.
I'm like, 412. and his friends would go, what the fuck is wrong with your kid? And he's just
like a savant, essentially.
Yeah, how many home runs did Mickey Mantle hit in 1960? And I would go boom, boom, and they would go, what's wrong with him? And I was 3-4 years old.
So how were you able to come up with this information?
My dad used to buy me almanacs.
Oh yeah,
and I would just memorize numbers and stuff like that. And I love like sabermetrics and stuff, like Bill James.
Sabermetrics is absolutely. That's the reason why I'm into baseball, and I feel that nowadays, if you're not into baseball, you're missing out on a lot because sabermetrics, to me, it's kind of half the fun.
I just feel like if you don't like sports, and this connects to like one of your questions, why there's so many sports games in the first book, and it's just like I feel like if you don't like a sport, then you're a communist. And there's nothing wrong with being a communist because I know you just came back from Cuba.
I'm not.
There's
but
spectacle, even like professional wrestling.
Listen.
There's spectacle. There's like something.
Communist countries love their sports, so I think, I'm a baseball fan because I'm Cuban. So
absolutely.
I think if I had been born here, maybe I would have been less of a baseball fan.
It's a funny point because I think we did talk about this in.
But the communist countries don't like sports.
No, that the fact that there's so many sports games in this book is something I do like because
I appreciate it. I love it. Yeah,
I'm not a sports game guy. Like I don't play, your 2Ks, your Maddens and stuff like that. But when we were doing our last episode, which was NBA Jam and just weird sports games in general, is when I sort of realized like everybody who's ever had a console, who's ever played video games for an extended period of time, there always is a sports game that you were like, this is the sports game I played when I was growing up, and I really like it.
The way that I feel, and it's the reason why my third book that's going to be out in the spring of 2020 is going to be The Minds Behind the Sports Games.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'll give you guys the list later. It's insane.
No, it's amazing. And I think there's a psychological kind of impasse with video gamers, in liking sports, even though they liked it when they were kids. And that has to do with growing up in high school, being picked on, etc., and the jocks being into the sports, etc. But I think that sports are ultimately just video games you play in real life.
Absolutely.
It's just LARPing. Basically, sports are just LARPing, essentially.
Right. for me, it was just like, because I was obsessed with like numbers and statistics and stuff.
They're an RPG.
That I was able to take control over like the teams and the players that I love so much. And like I'm 6'4", so like I was a jock in high school. I was on the baseball team, the basketball team, and stuff. But what I used to do is, this is like PS1 days, where I would manually update the rosters for all of these games, and then I would sell my saves to players on like the teams with me because they were like, "Oh,
gotcha."
Face Off 99 is out. Oh, you have the Islanders updated rosters. You have the Rangers updated rosters. I'm like, $5. I'm like, oh, give me your memory card. I'll give it back to you tomorrow, and I'll
exactly. That was the age before downloads and updates.
And I feel like this is the thing too. The games that we actively super remember are not sports games, and they're not like first-person shooters.
But they must be preserved all the same.
Absolutely. But,
and when you have iterations where you have an NHL game every year, you have a triple play, or you have an NBA Live every year, it's easy to have that fall through the cracks.
And the thing is, though, those games sell. First-person shooters and sports games are the best-selling games on the market.
Oh, yeah.
So without those two genres, we may not
have games at all.
Might not have said, I want to make Super Meat Boy. There may not be a market unless there's sports games and first-person shooters that sell like crazy.
It's funny because it's just by kind of coincidence that for the last 3 episodes, in some shape or form, we've talked about sports. I think a big part of it is that the Toronto Raptors won the championship, and so
buddy,
we have a clause in our contract that Paul inserted that we need to mention that from every episode going forward.
Yeah, so, Toronto Raptors winning, but we don't talk about Kawhi Leonard.
Hey, he's still loved in Canada, so
he is, and we've established this. The greatest Canadian to ever live.
Anyways, he really is.
But I do appreciate.
It's definitely not John Tavares.
No. I do appreciate that aspect because
can't stand John Tavares.
For all of us, we do have some sport game. For me, it was Ken Griffey Jr. baseball, and that game, I think a lot of people still look back fondly upon. That was actually a rare game, which people don't realize. Rare, from Donkey Kong Country, Killer Instinct, etc. They worked on that game.
See, the thing that killed Ken Griffey Jr. for me, because I love the way it looks, I love the gameplay mechanics, but I mean, Bolt Lightning. The pitcher's names and stuff, it didn't have the player's license. So
but you could build them into it.
You could.
Yeah. So that was the other thing. But
it plays great.
But even I've always felt, for example, that even the people who say they're not into sports games, like, for example, for me, like, if I'm thinking back sports games that I really enjoyed, like, honestly, 10 Pin Alley is a game I played a lot,
Well, then you're going to love my sports book.
Exactly. And so, but even stuff like, when you're really talking about the overall, like what qualifies as a sports game, I loved wrestling games back in the day. Like, is that a sports game? Like Tony Hawk.
It is.
I love Tony Hawk. Like
SmackDown was the game that got me into wrestling.
Yeah,
I did not care for wrestling before that, but it got me into that Attitude Era.
WCW NWO No Mercy is one of the
that's actually featured in the sports book.
Yeah, it's one of the one of the best
Sanders killed
N64 games that I've ever played.
Revenge.
That was a great era for wrestling games. Nowadays we only have the 2K series, unfortunately, for now.
Yeah.
But back in the day, we had so many different. I mean, you had essentially Acclaim doing the WCW stuff, etc. I mean, they did the WWF. They had the license for a while.
Yeah.
But that's an episode that we need to get into at some point in the future.
I think the real problem with sports games
what comes out
now is that they've just all, like, every major sport has sort of congealed into the one big tentpole.
And it's so unfortunate.
Like, you don't get stuff like Mutant
because of exclusive licensing.
You don't get
that's one of the reasons
like
why,
Base Wars, like stuff like that. You don't see anymore.
That's one of the reasons why I have games like NHL Face Off and Mutant League Football and 10 Pin Alley, because those games don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
I remember back in the day, there was like 8 to 10 different basketball games across all the consoles.
And you may prefer one over the other. You may prefer the feel of one over the other. For example, back in the day, I didn't care for the 2K brand of baseball. Like, some other people liked it. It came out on the Dreamcast first, but then it was released. But I didn't like how it felt. And so I prefer the Triple Play and MVP Baseball. MVP Baseball was fantastic.
2005.
And it was just killed. It was just killed. And I love MLB The Show. I think it's a fantastic. It's probably, to me, the best sports game out right now, just in terms of franchise. But I miss MVP Baseball.
Absolutely.
And after they lost the license, they tried to do the college baseball thing, and it's not the same. It's just absolutely not the same.
College baseball.
I hate to say it, but they don't. So, so what was it about RBI Baseball that kind of pulled you in? Was that kind of like you said, I like video games?
RBI Baseball was the first baseball game that I ever played that had real players in it.
Yeah.
So it was just like there was eight teams and 2 all-star teams. So it's like I was a Mets fan, but I love Don Mattingly.
Which you answered my next question. Are you a Mets or Yankees fan?
I'm a Mets fan.
Good.
My condolences.
I guess good or bad.
Know, right?
It depends on
the thing is, it's a funny story. I'll tell you guys really quick. Growing up, I was a Yankees fan, an Islanders fan, and a Knicks fan, and a Jets fan. So one day my dad.
So 1 out of 4. Basically successful.
That's a murderer's row of mediocrity, except for the Yankees.
Yeah, well, the Islanders.
But he decided he needed to complete the entire murderer's row, and so he added the Mets.
So what happened?
That's what I was thinking.
My dad was out bowling, and I was watching the Rangers. Because I love hockey, and I was just like, the Islanders weren't on. And the Rangers were playing the Blackhawks, and the Blackhawks had Jeremy Roenick and Steve Larmer and Chris Chelios. So I'm just enjoying the game. And my dad comes home and he gets all like De Niro on me. He's like, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I'm watching a hockey game." It's like, "I don't watch the Rangers in this house. What's wrong with you?" And I'm like, "They're playing the Blackhawks." He's like, "Okay, whatever." My dad ends up blocking MSG. Like, couldn't watch Yankees anymore. Couldn't watch the Knicks. Couldn't watch the Rangers. So then I ended up changing affiliations. I became a New Jersey Nets fan. Because this was like they were on the same channel as the Islanders, so I ended up becoming a Mets, Islanders, Nets, and Jets fan. So like when the Nets were making the finals like 3-4 years in a row, everyone's like, "You're a Nets fan?" And I'm like, "I remember when Derek Coleman and Drazen Petrovic were on the Nets. I watched them back then."
Terrible times.
Deep cuts.
So they were like shocked that I knew like the history of the Nets, that I wasn't just like a front runner or whatever. But so being able to play RBI Baseball, like, it just gave me access to all of these players and their stats, and like,
especially being a savant about sabermetrics, you were like, this is what I need.
Stats and like I would play RBI Baseball. I would play like 1 inning with the Cardinals, just so I can get like a single with Vince Coleman, and then just steal like every base because he was the fastest player in the game. Like I would do stuff like that, like just because I enjoyed that all these players played differently from one another.
Yeah. So am I right in assuming that the NES was your first console?
Yes. And then I was in love with the NES. It was a great console. The console, though, that I would say that I started to really like flex my creative muscles, was probably the Game Boy.
It's an amazing console. If you want to call it a console, portable.
I never had to stop playing.
Yeah.
And I had
and you could take it out.
The light and magnifier that went on it, so when I would go to bed, I still remember beating Kirby's Adventure in my bed.
Kirby's Adventure was actually the first game. Kirby's Dream Land was actually the first Game Boy game I ever had. And it was one of those games that stays in your memory.
The music, I had my headphones on playing with the light on.
And that's the thing also as well, because the Game Boy was it was actually the first portable. The PS1 was the first console, but the first video game system that I ever had was a Game Boy.
Yeah.
And that console, that portable handheld, had so many different games on it.
Super Mario.
And being in Cuba, I did not have access to a lot of information. And so, for example, I played Frank Thomas's Big Hurt Baseball on that. I played WrestleMania on that. And that's how I got to learn about things that I had no access to.
Yep.
And so it gave you a very accessible way of getting information that you otherwise wouldn't be able to get. So it's a very underrated console on that. I mean, it may not have been the best representation of that particular game, but if you had nothing else, it really did the trick. And you could take it anywhere.
It's like you said, it did stuff that other consoles just couldn't do. To this day, when I go to bed and I have a portable video game console in my hand and I'm lying in bed, before I go to sleep, to this day, I am a 10-year-old boy when I'm doing that.
Oh, yeah. I agree.
Like, it just
and you feel like a 10-year-old boy.
What's that?
You feel like a 10-year-old boy. It's like, I'm in my 40s and I'm going to bed, being tucked away with my Game Boy.
And it's nice, man. Like,
It takes you back.
I used to run retro game tournaments at a video game store in Brooklyn. And I decided, this was 3 years ago, I'm like, we're going to have a original red and blue Pokemon tournament.
Yeah.
And you have to bring your Game Boy, and you have to bring...
it's good to mention that because Paul loves Pokemon a lot.
I don't like Pokemon at all. But please continue, Patrick.
No. So, I ended up buying a brand new copy of Red. And I started the game completely from scratch, and I rebuilt the team and stuff, and we were only expecting 8 or 10 people to come. 20 people came.
Yeah. So what were your mainstays on the Game Boy? What were the games that...
Super Mario Land.
One of the greatest opening level music by Chip Tanaka.
Absolutely.
Hip Tanaka. And a game that really made you realize I can play Mario on the go.
But it was such a different Mario.
It was a different Mario because it was done by RD1.
Yep.
But then they came out with Mario Land 2.
Which was amazing.
And Mario Land 2 just completely changed everything up. And then from that, the Wario Land series came up, which we're going to have to talk about at some point because I freaking love Wario.
There's on the Game Boy that I really enjoy too.
What's Crazy Castle?
Crazy Castle.
Yeah. Crazy Castle was actually done by Kemco. And I've heard Jeremy Paris talk about this quite a bit. And basically that game was licensed out.
Oh, yeah.
Like in Japan, it's like a Mickey Mouse game.
Yeah.
It's come out in a ton of different variations.
With the Wonder Boy series.
Exactly. It has that weird tortured licensing history where they were very free to just license it to everyone.
Penguin Wars was definitely a game.
I never heard of that. Yeah.
It's basically
Penguin Wars is great.
Oh, so it's basically you have 8 or 10 bulls on this. That doesn't sound right. Just go with me. On your side, and then the other guy has 8 bulls, and you have to get all of the bulls on the other side.
Yeah.
And each character that you control is a different animal that has different skills.
Yeah.
So the game is just bulls going back and forth. Again, I'm sorry, guys, just bear with me. So there's a lot of bulls swinging around in this game. And they just remade it a couple of years ago for the Switch.
Oh, really?
And it's great on the Switch.
Wow.
Too.
Well, and we've talked about the Switch quite a bit on this podcast. We are notable fans of the Switch, but I think that the Switch is probably the best successor to the Game Boy because it has a lot of experience that you can't get anywhere else, and they're portable. And they happen to be portable.
Yep.
And so
I have not docked my Switch once since I got it.
I used to be like that. For the first 2 years that I had the Switch, I did not dock my Switch. But then I had to play Blazing Chrome, and I was like, I want to play this on a big screen because I want to feel like I'm playing Contra.
You do.
And I did not regret it. So then from the Game Boy, do you have any other consoles that you were...
I mean, I have over 3,000 games now. I haven't gotten rid of anything that I've bought since I was 13, 14 years old.
That's good because a lot of people go through the period where they just sell off everything.
I remember the first time my wife saw all of my stuff when she was my girlfriend, she was just like, why? And I'm like, don't ask. And I'm never selling any of it. And she's like, well, what if, let's just say hypothetically, we were tight financially. I'm like, we will never be tight financially.
Yeah.
I was like, I will do everything that I have to do to make sure that we are okay.
Yeah. So that I don't have to sell my stuff.
I will never sell any of my shit.
There's no money in the world. There's no money in the world because I have a lot of friends that sold their stuff and they say, well, I have like 2 copies of Panzer Dragoon Saga and I sold all of that.
Yeah.
And it's like, you don't remember the money that you got from that.
Yeah.
That's gone.
Yeah.
So,
okay, no. I disagree. When I was a kid, I played tons and tons of different games. And the reason I was able to afford to do that was because I was constantly trading.
Constantly selling.
So, like, I had a Genesis, I had a Super Nintendo, I had a Turbo Duo. I never had any of them at the same time, though. And the only reason I got to play all those kick-ass Turbo CD games was because I just kept trading stuff in.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's very different,
when
Paul.
I look
That's
back on
very
that,
different. What I'm actually referring to is you grow old, all these games are stored in your basement, and you're like, you know what? I'm just going to sell this. We need some money. You know, some of these games are going for quite a bit.
Oh, that's a different story.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about trading. Trading, totally fine. And especially when you're tight on money. But I'm talking about, I don't have anything to do with these games anymore. I'm just going to sell them off. And I have a lot of friends
madness.
Yeah, like
I agree.
And that's where having a partner that actually appreciates that matters a lot. I remember at one creation,
she doesn't appreciate it.
but she can just deal with it.
Yeah.
But
she appreciates you being happy.
That's the most important
That's the most important part. And like 1 year ago, I was like, you know what? I'm fed up with this whole thing. I was fed up with the whole Instagram. And I said, I'm going to start selling off my collection. And when my girlfriend heard that, she was like, what the hell are you thinking? Like, just stop. You're talking madness here. You have a treasure trove and you're going to regret it. I said, you're completely right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing me back down.
I was at a GameStop like 8 months ago, and this kid was just getting rid of like, it had to be like anywhere from like 80 to 100 games. And I looked him dead in the face, and he was like 12, 13. I'm like, you're going to regret this.
Yeah.
And he goes, no, I'm not. And I'm just, in my head, I'm like, you're an asshole. So,
well, especially if you're giving it to GameStop or something.
Get it.
You know?
That's the cool part, too, because one of my buddies works at GameStop, and like, they give nothing back for like PS2, Xbox games and stuff like that. So they'll tell them, like, listen, if you want to donate them to us, you can. And he's like, but we're not even going to sell them. Like, so
and people don't want to go through the trouble of
the guy knows that like I'm the person that I am. So like, the last 2 weeks, I've gotten like 30 games from him. You know, stuff like stupid stuff like Big Mother Truckers, you know, and like Time Splitters 2. And you're like, oh my God, thank you. I will take this. I will love this. You know, so
what was the first, you know, when did you first know that you wanted to be involved in gaming as a professional? Because I know that you worked in journalism before, you worked for NBC, and you had a career before games, essentially. So how do you know that you wanted to be more involved? I know that you had that time where you were like, okay, my wife is pregnant, I have a lot of, you know, time to myself that I could do something, but do you always know that you wanted to be involved in gaming?
Yeah, well, see, the thing is, like, I've always done voices. And
I couldn't tell.
I just didn't know how to get into voice acting. And after the book came out, one of the reasons why I did so many diverse games is because I didn't know how many books I was going to do. Yeah. It was like kind of like get my load out.
So you just kind of cast a wide net. And you said,
all the developers that I ever really wanted to interview, I got in there. Yeah. And then right after the book came out, I'm just like, no, I need to do another book. Yeah. But then what happened was I was on Twitter, and I interview indie devs all the time. Yeah. You know, like easily like a year, like 100, 150 indie devs I interview. And I saw this game on Twitter, and it looked like a Catholic priest, like Minecraft style, walking through like this forest. And like a tree like comes alive and like slaps him in the face. Yeah. It's like, this game looks really cool. So I reach out to the guys, and I'm like, do you want to do an interview? And they're like, sure. So lo and behold, I find out I'm the first person to ever like contact them. I'm the first person to ever interview them. So I interview them, and then they're like, do you want to play it? So I'm like, sure. So they send it to me, and it's like a point-and-click like narrative, but with like the Minecraft visuals. It's really cool. Great music. Yeah. And the first line in the game is like, it's been a week since we've last heard from you, blah, blah, blah. And week, W-E-E-K. Yeah. It was spelled W-E-A-K. Yeah. So I immediately said to my wife, I'm like, this game is really cool, but it could be a lot better if they had somebody to edit it. Yeah. She just said, oh my God. She knew what I was going to do.
Another project.
And I contacted them, and I was like, guys, I really like your game. I'm like, but it's obvious that English is your second language, and I would love to edit the dialogue in your game. So then we came up with a price. So now that they're sending me stuff, and I edited all of the dialogue for the game. So now we're getting ready to go to Kickstarter. So now I've been working with them for like a month. Yeah. Okay. And I'm just like, wow, this is like, I have a paying gig in video games. This is awesome. Yeah. And we're getting ready to go to Kickstarter, and the voice actor that's playing the main character, the Padre, Alexander, left right before the Kickstarter.
Yeah.
He's having family problems or something like that, and they're like, we're screwed. And I'm like, well, I could do a better voice than him. And they're like, really? I'm like, it's supposed to be a scary survival horror point and click, and the guy sounded like Russell Brand. I'm like a wacky Englishman. Oh my god! You know? I'm like, nah. So again, like you're gonna see a reoccurring theme here, but like most of my cool stuff happens in my man cave. I just go in there and I start to think and stuff. So I'm like, I could do a voice, and they're like, oh, well, give us something. Yeah. So I go in the man cave, and I'm very good at that movie trailer voice, like
in a world, one man, one tortilla.
You know, and, but I'm like, I wanted to maintain the English accent.
Yeah.
So, what's the movie with Russell Brand? Gladiator.
Russell Crowe.
Russell Crowe. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. Russell Crowe kicked my ass for calling him Russell Brand. But there's an old man in that movie that's like the original Gladiator, and he had this great voice. So
a boy came across this dark English voice. I am Alexander the Portrait. Hello, Paul from Canada, the mountains.
And I sent it to them, and they were like, "This is great. This is exactly what we want." So they're like, "Can you re-record? Can you record all of the lines in the game like today? And we'll put it in the game today. So this way, when we go to Kickstarter, you know." So I'm like, "Sure." So then I did it, and then after that, I didn't want to be a one-hit wonder, so then I auditioned for Relentless Rex, and I got that, the main character in Relentless Rex, and then I got the Caillou Offensive. I'm like the narrator in Caillou Offensive, and then I started doing podcasts to promote my book. And one of the guys that interviewed me was Pete Paquette, and he was a senior animator on BioShock Infinite, and he's the keyframe animator for Overwatch now. He's super talented. He's worked on Rio, Ice Age. Like, he's amazing. And at the end of the interview, he goes to me, you know, if you want to get more involved in video games, like, let me know after the show. I'm like, no. I'm like, I'm letting you know right now. So after the show was over, he was like, oh, I'll call you in like 2 weeks and we'll talk. So my wife is like my yang, like yin and yang. Like, if I go, oh, this guy said he's going to call me in 2 weeks, my wife is like, wait 2 weeks and see what happens. Don't get too ahead of yourself. See what happens. She's going to be
wives. We love them.
And 2 weeks later, he goes to me, oh, well, I have this idea for this game, and it's just kind of like this, like something like this robot is trying to save this planet, and I'm like, oh, sounds like Mega Man kind of, and he's like, yeah, but it's more than that. So what I want you to do is I want you to build the world around it, and I'm like, well, like everything, and he's like, yeah, okay, and that started Kroom, the game that we're working on now. But it's just like that. It all just started snowballing. It started from a Twitter message. And then just me taking the initiative, and then just constantly asking people questions.
You touched on something that was interesting to me, in that, you know, you said you cast this really wide net, and you said that you managed to get pretty much everybody that you'd wanted to talk to up to that point, I assume, in this book. And I think, at least from my perspective, as somebody who sees something like this book, I think it's very easy to think, or like to initially think like, the book is done, like, you know, he got all these great people to be on it, he interviewed them, like, it's great. But it, you know, when you think about it in those steps, it seems really easy. Like, was there anybody that you reached out to that was difficult to sort of get a hold of? Was there anybody you still haven't been able to talk to that you really want to talk to?
Yeah, absolutely. So every one of them was difficult to speak to, and the fact that, like, these people are telling you their life story, and you're not paying them. And you have to work on their schedule. So, like, I interviewed Howard Scott Warshaw. I was in my kitchen on Skype at, like, 2 o'clock in the morning. You know? And then Howard didn't want to sign the release, because he was like, why do I have to sign anything? And I had to tell him, like, listen, the book is 100,000 words, and you have, like, 9,000 between yours and E.T., like, if you don't do this, you're gonna, like, really hurt me. You know, I invested this time in you, and he was great about it. He was like, just do me a favor. He goes, when you interview me again, just remind me that, like, I need to sign a release. And I was like, okay. So he was great about it. But the thing is, like, every single chapter, it was things like that.
So were the lawyerly aspects the more difficult aspects of the whole thing, where people were just like, I don't feel comfortable signing this?
So, like, Donna Bailey, who did Centipede, she had just retired from her job, and I totally wanted more female voices in the book. And she was just like, no, I think she's working on her own book. That's what I think. And then Alan McNeil, who did Berserk. I had him all confirmed. I sent him questions. His mother was sick, and then he kind of just like disappeared off the face.
Yeah.
Nuts.
Yeah, which that would have been a marquee
killer. Yeah.
Then the Doom chapter,
Berserk on the
Atari 2600 and the arcade,
and the Vectrex, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was on the Vectrex, I think.
So what ended up happening was Doom was the last game that got added to the book, and that actually I wrote that the day the manuscript was supposed to be put in. So what happened was I did the interview with David Palmer, who did the Game Boy Advance port of Doom, and it's a great story. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, Dave was fighting stage 4 cancer. I haven't spoken to him since the book came out. I've emailed him to make sure that he's okay. I don't know if he's still alive. He was really sick. And what happened was, this was like 3 or 4 days before the manuscript was due, and I'm just sitting in my living room, and my wife is like, "What's the matter?" I'm like, "I need Doom in this book." Yeah. And I'm like, I don't want John Romero because that story's been told 1,000 times. I want to hear about this version of the, of the game. So I emailed him and I'm like, I have like 2,000 words left in my book. They're yours if you want them. Just send me the answers. And I remember I was at a department meeting for my job and I was writing because he sent me the answers and then I just started writing the chapter right then and there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I managed to squeeze that in. So I had some great, amazing people. But then, I had other people like, who were great, but like, Mark Turmel, I'll give you an example from NBA Jam.
Yeah.
Awesome guy. Like, we talked about parenting. We talked about life. We Facebooked for hours back and forth bullshitting with each other and stuff. And then it would just be like, Mark, when am I going to get the answers to the book?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm on vacation right now. And blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, so how is everything? Oh, everything's great. My wife, my kids, blah, blah, blah. Oh, that's great. Da, da, da. We'll bullshit and blah, blah, blah. And he's super charismatic.
Yeah.
And then it's just like, Mark, my book is due in like 7 days.
Yeah.
When am I going to get the answers? But then 3 weeks before he would go, do you have Mortal Kombat in the book? And I'm like, no. I'm like, but I emailed John Tobias and Ed Boon. I didn't get an answer. I pitched them.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, well, I have John's like personal email. Just email him and tell him that I sent you over there. So then I emailed John and I'm like, hey, what's up? And he goes, yeah, I'll talk to you about Mortal Kombat. And I'm just like, okay, so Mark is amazing.
Yeah. He will go the extra mile for you, but it's just kind of getting the product.
Because the thing is, he's Mark Turmel.
Yeah.
He marches to the beat of his own drum. He's like totally. And I've interviewed people that have worked with him at Midway, and they were just like that's how he is.
Guy. But that's the thing I think that makes them the guy, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's the kind of like that sort of particular quality in him that makes him sort of be the guy that can make these games and these experiences and all that. But then when it comes to getting interviewed for a book,
and it makes sense too because in the sports book there's a chapter on NFL Blitz 2002.
Yeah.
NFL Blitz 2002 didn't come out until after the Super Bowl that year.
Okay.
And it only sold 450,000 copies compared to like the million plus that the Blitz before that sold. So, and the producer on
so
Blitz,
is that on Arrival essentially?
Yeah. So, but the producer told me, he was like, if these guys were just able to get something out on time, they would have made themselves a lot more money. And that just reminded
do you think it had to do with the delay? Do you think
No, it had, in the chapter I discussed it, had everything to do with the delay. Because these guys were used to working on arcade products that...
They didn't really matter when you released them.
Yeah. Yep. So, I'll tell you guys another story really quick. I won't mention the person's name because it's messed up. But, like, I got really close with a lot of these guys. Like, and I still talk to them. But I remember one guy in particular sent, like, a group email out. And it was like, guys, just do me a favor. If anyone sends you naked pictures of me, like, just delete them. I got in a fight with some girl that I was messing around with. And this guy's like in his late 60s, early 70s. I'm like, good for him. Like, good for him. Like, you go, boy. Like, you do you. But it was just like, they're great. They're great freaking
awesome.
people.
So I guess that goes to my next question, which is, what was the interview process like? Was it different for each one of them, where you had to Skype with them and just had a list of questions, or were you just kind of shooting out the questions and then getting some answers back and working with that?
It would start with me going either to my man cave or my local video game store, Brooklyn Video Games, and just looking through. Like right now, I'm like, you don't even know it, but I'm researching. Yeah. I'm just like, oh, maybe that. Da, da, da. And then I get their contact information, LinkedIn, Facebook, Moby Games, like wherever I have to, deep Google searches.
Which, by the way, let me just give a shout out to Moby Games. They're doing the Lord's work.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I don't know who's running that,
yeah,
but it's been one of our greatest assets.
Moby Games.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't know about it.
No.
And it's so arcane. It's like in like 1999.
Yeah, font essentially. The template looks like it was done 20 years ago.
Awesome.
But it's exactly what you need.
Information kind of makes your eyes bleed when you look at it.
Like 3 months ago, when the Padre like officially launched, like I went on there and I'm like, oh my god, I have my own Moby Games profile.
Yeah,
like
that's
as
awesome.
a developer, like holy crap, I made it. You know?
I
didn't because I still take the bus to work. But you know,
but it's kind of like that moment where you show up on the IMDb page.
Yes.
Yeah.
Where you're like, oh, I can call myself an actor now.
A lot of it is incomplete because I know developers that have worked on stuff and they're not credited on there.
I know.
But this is a
But
start.
it's as much as we can get.
Yeah,
and until someone goes in there and says, hey, I actually worked on this game.
Yeah.
And not all of it is accurate,
Absolutely.
unfortunately. But it's the best you got.
So then I pitch them.
Yeah.
And then depending on what they say, then we just take it from there. So there's a lot of email interviews.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Skype interviews. There's a lot of face-to-face interviews too.
Yeah.
Like Michael Brook, who did NHL 94 and NHLPA 93.
Paul's favorite game of all time.
Oh, dude.
But I mean, we hung out in his hotel room for like 2 hours
That's awesome.
and just bullshitted. And now he's writing the foreword to my sports book.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And he also was the producer on the original Genesis version of Madden.
Yeah.
So he has like 3 chapters in the sports book. It's like NFL 95, NBA Action 95, and the original Draw Madden Football. So it's just like...
So I guess my next question is, what did you find was the best way to get information out of the developers? Was it just like the face-to-face interviews? Or do you find that the more structured format of just giving them questions and then having them answer was
I think
the
it's
best
a
way about it?
combination. So it's like there were times when, like perfect example, Michael Brook, we did stuff via email.
Yeah.
We did stuff face-to-face. We did stuff on the phone. So when these guys want to have like a long, prolonged relationship with me,
Yeah.
that's the best situation. So
Yeah.
I've had developers...
Yeah, where you develop a rapport with them
Yes.
and you develop a close affinity with them.
It's very rare that I've just been like one and done with some of these developers.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And one of the things, like we mentioned before the podcast, we just released an NBA Jam episode. By the time that this releases, it's probably going to be like 2 months old or something around that. But I was very disappointed, to see that there was this trove of information that I did not have access to before that. And so, for example, we mentioned on the podcast that the engine for Mutant League Football was the engine for Madden. And then I read the first chapter in your book, and it's like many gamers believe that this was the engine for Madden, but it wasn't true.
So
and so I was like, well, way to go kick yourself, Ozzy.
Well, we can't promote this
I
book
know,
now
right?
if it's proving us wrong.
My approach was, and this goes into like one of your questions, is when I started interviewing somebody, I would go, so it says this on Wikipedia.
Yeah.
I know that shit's wrong, so tell me the true story.
Yeah.
So like Michael Menheim, who I want to just say for the record is probably one of my favorite developers of all time. And
he did Mutant League Football.
if you like the Mutant League Football chapter in this, we did the Mutant League Hockey chapter in the sports book, and it's just as good as the Mutant League Football.
Because from what I saw, we talked a little bit about Mutant League Hockey, but we weren't really able to get too much into it because we had little experience with it, and there's not a lot of information out there in Mutant League
now there
Hockey.
will be.
No, not at all.
And the thing about it is, I didn't know that EA was basically like sending these guys out, on death row. Basically, they were just like, get whatever you can out.
Despite the fact that like Mutant League Football outsold Madden.
And it was just like they wanted to be more serious. They wanted to be more professional.
Yep.
And so, to know that that was the reason why that game was not what it could have been was really eye-opening.
Yeah.
And so, like you say, there's a whole other story that goes beyond just the reviews. The reviews just tell you maybe like 0.1% of what you need to know about a video game. Because, like you say, a person's opinion will not give you anything about the context in which it was released.
Yeah. So, like, one of the questions I asked Mike is, like, how did you come up with it? And he said, he was like, we liked the view in Madden, we liked the play calling structure. He goes, but it was all designed from scratch. Like, sure, we used Madden as, like, a prototype because Madden was the de facto
was
standard
the framework,
at that point. And just to truth be told, like, Madden, the original Madden is a knockoff of Cyberball.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like if you talk to Scott Orr, and Cyberball is featured in my sports book that's coming out.
Yeah.
Scott
we also
Orr
talked about Cyberball.
Says like we saw a football game with the behind the view
Yeah.
And the play calling structure and the passing window. And
because
stuff
before
like
that, you had Tech Mobile, which was actually on the horizontal view.
Yeah.
So they were the ones that actually had the vertical view, essentially, behind the back.
My biggest question when I talk to gamers is, when you listen to a song for the first time, you go, oh, this kind of reminds me of Nirvana.
Yeah,
This kind of reminds me of U2. Or, oh, these guys sound like The Bravery, or blah, blah, blah. When you play games, you do the same exact thing, but you don't know that you do.
Yeah.
But why don't we ask those questions? Why don't we say, who produced this game?
Well, one of the things that I find the most interesting when doing the podcast is kind of trying to find the context of what was happening at the time that this game was released.
Yeah.
So, for example, I recently did a radio episode, and I realized that 1996, 1997, there were some soundtracks, and a lot of them sounded like Nine Inch Nails. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, Nine Inch Nails was pretty huge back in the day. And so that's probably what they were listening to, and that's probably what they were trying to do in capturing that industrial sound.
Yeah.
So a lot of that zeitgeist is lost, in the bins of history.
That's one of my jobs, I feel like, too, is to preserve that, so people understand it.
Yeah.
So you then had this wealth of games, and how did you go about kind of culling and selecting which games and how you were going to structure? Because you had too many games, you decided you were going to split it into several books.
Yeah.
And so how do you decide, okay, these are the ones that are going, and this is going to be the pilot, these are going to be the pioneers.
Yeah. You're just trying to put, enough big names in the first book that would make people sort of
that's the
latch
thing.
onto
with
it.
The first book, I didn't know if there was going to be a second book.
Yeah.
So I wanted to write something that I would be proud of. Mm-hmm. That if I only got to do one book.
Yeah, that this was going to be something that you could feel like you put your work and effort into.
And then, because this is the thing, once you release a book, and this is the thing too, I didn't hold anything back with those answers. Like, all of the answers that these people gave me, I found a way to incorporate into every chapter. So I remember, I was having a conversation with somebody that read the book, and they're just spewing all this stuff back at me, and it's like they knew the topic just as well as I did.
Yeah.
And I said, oh my God, I'm not special anymore. I was cool because I was the one that curated all of this, that I knew all of this stuff, but now these people know everything that I know.
Yeah.
So how do I make myself cool again?
Yeah.
I got to write another book.
You got to write another one.
So this book has 36 games in it, so I had 43 for the sequel.
Okay.
And it was the same type of little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I like about the book is that you can essentially just treat it as bite-sized interviews. And so, you're able to be on the train, for example, and
Perfect.
just
That's exactly
read,
where I was going.
So just read, or the toiletable, essentially. We don't want to call it a toiletable book.
Well, to me, those are the best types of books.
Yeah. And so you're able to get information in a bite-sized format where you don't have to sift through hundreds of pages, in order to...
If you take my book into the bathroom, I consider it an honor.
You consider it an honor.
Because then that means you really want to read it.
That's fair. That's a fair point.
It's like, I remember when I was in graduate school, one of my professors asked the class this highfalutin question. Where do you want people to read your work? And some of these people, Air Force One, the Library of Congress, and I went, the bathroom. I swear. And my professor walks over to me and he sticks his hand out and he shook my hand. He goes, yes. And he's like, why? And I'm like, because then that means they really want to read it.
Yeah.
And he's like...
So what was the...
And I can guarantee you everybody spent more time on the toilet than on Air Force One, so...
That's true.
Yeah.
Or it's like your Game Boy. You were mentioning the Game Boy before. I guarantee you that you took that Game Boy into the bathroom with you.
Oh, absolutely. Everywhere. I mean, I had to make sure that it had the 6 batteries fully charged.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I was in Cuba, and so we didn't get batteries. And so I had to do the rechargeable battery. So I had, the charging station. Kids nowadays don't know what that is.
Yeah,
I had the rechargeable batteries because you couldn't really do disposable at the time.
I want something that I noticed that I found really interesting about the book as well is, and Ozzy had mentioned this to me originally. I didn't really notice it. It didn't really sink in until I started looking through it myself. Is that I feel like gamers have a very sort of focused attention on Japanese games, Japanese developers. Obviously, Nintendo's the biggest thing in the world. Yeah. Sony's also a Japanese company.
Everyone wants to interview Nintendo.
Exactly.
Everyone wants to interview
Everybody wants to do Hideo Kojima. Everybody wants to do Miyamoto, stuff like that. Yeah. You have a lot, the majority, vast majority.
It's like the North American game
are Western developers, which are, and that's how you come across these games like NBA Jam, League Football, Maniac Mansion that people really love, but I feel don't get as much attention on the developer level than the Japanese side. So was that sort of the focus of yours? Were you trying to mostly focus on Western developers?
So I feel like a lot of the Japanese developers, have been interviewed ad nauseum by other Japanese press. I feel like they're not as forthcoming with Western press.
Yep.
They're much more restrained because they don't want to offend anyone, and they don't want to go against the company line. It's more of an issue in Japan than it is over here in the States.
So it's like to get Nishizawa-san to speak to me about Wonder Boy. I mean, I had a translator that worked with him, and he was amazing. I love that chapter in the book. Yeah. Because he's like a philosopher. He's so smart.
And he's very open about things.
He was super open.
He's worked with Lizard Cube. He's worked with the other developers that you just did. Monster Boy, was that the name?
That's a great
The Curse Kingdom. And he's just out there. He seems like a guy that's not afraid.
He gets it. Like he totally got what I was trying to do. He said yes, like right away. Yeah. Which was great. But the thing was, Japanese developers weren't as forthcoming. Howard Scott Warshaw, all the Atari guys, all the Genesis guys, they wanted to talk. Yeah. So I was just in the business of, does this game have a story? So like, I'm working on the shooter book now. I'm almost finished with the sports book. I'm working on the shooter book now, and I'm talking to one of the developers that did 50 Cent Bulletproof. But he was like, Pat, he's like, don't have much of a story. He's like, doesn't have that good of a dev story. He's like, it's going to be boring. Nobody's going to like it. So I'm like, okay. You know, so I'll ask some background. Are you sure? Like, it's not that interesting? And then he's telling me, he's like, yeah, it's like not.
There wasn't any tales of 50 Cent coming in and saying, I want everything to be in gold.
Yeah, he didn't hold up anybody with a gun or anything like that. So sometimes that happens too. Sometimes somebody will tell me a story and I'll go, yeah, nobody cares. Like, this isn't going to be interesting. So I don't think there's like one, and I'm not saying this to be, narcissistic or anything, but I don't think there's like one crappy chapter in the book. I think there's like something. Like,
there are always pieces of information that you can take out of it. And it's just something that it's good that it's preserved for posterity.
Absolutely. So it's like, I wanted this book to be something for like us, like 20 and 30 somethings that are game players that wanted to look at these games in a completely different way. I wanted it to be a resource for young developers to see like what it takes to be a game developer, because by learning about what all these guys had to go through. And then 3, I wanted it to be something that was like good at an entry level for people that had no interest in games.
Yeah. And anyone that doesn't have an interest could access it and tell a story and be able to be enthralled by the story.
And I'm a college professor, but I feel like I'm a journalist first and foremost, and I don't write in a style where people will have a problem following me. Yeah. So I want, like, my nephew's 10 and he's read most of the book. Awesome. Yeah. That's and it's not written for a 10-year-old. I think it's written more for like a high school kid, like at the least, know. But he read along and he was like, oh, I want to try ET now. And I'm like,
that's awesome.
Good.
Yeah. That's awesome. So with that,
poor kid, man, trying ET.
I know.
So let's take a quick break, and we're gonna come back with Patrick, where he's gonna answer a few more questions on the games that he talks about in the minds behind the games. So we're back, and again, we're talking with Patrick Hickey Jr. He is the author of The Minds Behind the Games, and he's just already he's regaled us with his narrative glories. And so we're going to get back into it. Let me ask you, Patrick, was there a particular developer that you really wanted to get on, but you couldn't get?
Or haven't been able to yet?
There's a lot of them. There's my one white whale, and his name escapes me right now. It's terrible. And you guys
he's such a white whale that you don't even remember his name.
No, right?
Like, it literally, like, I just literally had it in my head, but he did Rad Racer on NES.
Okay. Rad Racer.
And but he also did Final Fantasy 3.
Oh, awesome.
Wow. But he's off the grid. Like, he's not a
Japanese developer?
No.
Okay.
But he worked for those companies.
Yeah.
So it'll come to me.
Was it the programmer that did a lot of the programming for those games?
Designer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other ones? I know that you were trying
Alan
to get.
I really wanted also to for the adventure book. I wanted to do Dungeons & Dragons Heroes because I enjoyed the crap out of that game.
Yeah.
And Brenda Romero did it. John Romero's wife.
Yeah, and they're working now on some stuff, and so they're about to release a new game. So maybe now so for their publicity, that might be a good way to get it. Yeah.
She was supposed to give me answers, and then she never did.
Oh, gotcha.
And that kind of hurt.
Yeah.
But then
We've already reached out to some people that they said yes, and then they just completely dropped off.
Yeah.
And it always feels like personal, even though it's not.
yeah,
You
it's
know?
not. It's not.
Yeah.
It's never personal, but you're like, well, fuck you too then.
It's like another one that kind of I don't want to say it aggravated me.
Yeah.
But it did say aggravate, so we'll just stick with that. I
Yeah.
don't want to. But I wanted Disney Infinity in the adventure game book, and I
nice.
got the producer
Yeah.
and one of the level designers, and the level designer actually did Link's 2004
Yeah.
on Xbox, which is the only Microsoft Xbox exclusive golf game. And it's like one of the best-selling PC golf games of all time. It's a great golf game.
I remember it, yeah.
Yeah.
And
That's what Microsoft was actually doing, sports
Yeah.
games. They had the NFL Fever, and they had the NBA Inside Drive
Yep.
and stuff.
Yeah, and those are mentioned in the sports book too.
Yeah.
So, but he gave me a great chapter on Links, but then he never spoke to me about Disney Infinity.
Oh,
And then
gotcha.
the producer from Disney Infinity confirmed with me like 3 or 4 times. And then it's like I have to annoy the living shit out of these people.
Yeah.
Like
And sometimes it's annoying. I mean, you don't want to be the nagger that's
Yeah.
like,
I have
hey,
no
guys.
problem. I
Yeah.
have no problem being
Yeah.
a nagger.
This is something that I wanted to ask you about as well, because I know a lot of the people that you've talked to, as we've already discussed, are no longer in the industry, and so, are more free to talk about some of this stuff.
At the same time, though, too, some of them don't want to talk. So,
Yeah.
for the shooter book, I wanted to get Dan Gorlin, who did Choplifter.
Okay.
And he's like, yeah, I don't do interviews on Choplifter
Yeah.
anymore. And I'm like, how could you not do interviews
When
on
that is
Choplifter?
what you're most known for, essentially.
Yeah, so he's doing like African like drum band stuff,
Okay.
and that's what he's into.
Yeah.
And he's super good at it and stuff. But my whole thing is like Choplifter.
We gotta talk about shoplifting.
We wouldn't have Desert Strike and Jungle Strike.
We wouldn't have that without.
But what I
Without
wanted to
shoplifting.
ask was the people who are still in, sort of in it, especially at major studios. Have you ever had any issues with studios not wanting them to talk about specific games?
I'll tell you a great story. So
Stuff like that.
for the adventure book, I caught some flack for putting Parappa the Rapper in the adventure book. And the reason why I did is because it's a rhythm game, but it's driven by its story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an adventure through like rhythm game mechanics.
Yeah.
So I got Perry Rogers, the producer, and I got Rodney Greenblatt, who did the character design. And I had enough to write a decent chapter, but then I'm like, I need Messiah Masora. the guy that,
from
like,
Nana and Cha, essentially.
I needed him.
Yeah.
So I would have all 3 voices, and it would be perfect. And he goes, I'm not doing it unless Sony gives the approval.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So I'm like, oh. So he's like, just be patient. So I'm like, okay. So like a week goes by, and then Sony goes, well, what are you planning to do? So I tell them, and I send them what I have so far, and they're like, just like one sentence back, what pictures are you using? So I sent them like the stuff that I knew that I could use, like box art, and like screenshots that I curated myself and stuff, and they're like, no, we're going to send you higher res photos. And they're like, does he need to sign a release? And I'm like, yes. And they're like, can we see the release? I'm like, sure. They're like, yeah, no problem. So Sony totally put their
good.
stamp of approval
That's
on it.
awesome.
For my shooter book, I just confirmed the first Gears of War.
Yeah.
And like, along the same lines. Like, the guy that I spoke to from Epic is just like, yeah, like, I see what you're doing. I see you're doing the right thing. This is what you want to do. Go ahead. Go kick ass.
Yeah.
You know? So a lot of them have been, and I'm talking to Activision right now. Because I'd really love to have a Call of Duty game in the shooter book. Cause
Yeah, I mean, you absolutely need it.
Sure.
I mean,
but the thing is, it's the same thing. It's Dustin going into that Russian, prison in the mall and Stranger Things. It's like, how many interviews does the Call of Duty team do? They don't do a lot of interviews.
Yeah.
And especially, this is the thing too.
well, what about getting the
well-
guys from, let's say, Respawn Games, who are EA now? Mm-hmm. They're the ones that know about Call of Duty. They did Modern Warfare, and they did Call of Duty up to Modern Warfare 2.
It's hard.
Or even the...
Because the thing is too, the turnaround. Some of these guys, they bounce around companies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's
yeah,
like
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
talking to one of the level designers for Metroid Prime 2 right now, and he's
Oh,
not.
that would be awesome.
He's not at Nintendo anymore.
Yeah.
So he's just like, "What are you doing? Like, what do you want to do?" And I told him, and he hasn't answered me yet. But it's like the thought of like he's at another company now, but he could go back to Nintendo one day.
Yeah. So you don't want to burn the bridges. So it's very
And
difficult
the thing
to...
is, though, too, like you've read some of the chapters. Like I'm not looking for these guys to flame anybody.
No.
But I just want.
All
I
very
want the,
positive.
I want the truth.
Yeah.
Like if
Yeah,
there's
that's something that struck me as you mentioned it, Paul. The book has a very positive tone. Even when you're talking about crunch or you're talking about the difficulties of development, it's still very positive.
Because the thing is, it's like if you want to listen to somebody trash a game, just go on YouTube.
Yeah. There are enough YouTube channels that do that.
I'm so sick of it, So it's like I wanted to present something.
So let me ask you, if you had to boil it down to one, what was the most surprising bit of information you learned where you were like, double take, like, whoa, did I just hear that?
So I think there's information in the sports book that people are going to be completely shocked, that people don't even know. Like when some of this information was told to me, I was just like, I was completely floored. But then for the first book, I would say the stuff in the Night Trap chapter.
Yeah.
Because like I had no idea that Night Trap was filmed in like 1985.
Yeah.
It didn't come out until like 1992, 1993.
And they repurposed it.
Like, I had no idea that the console that it was originally supposed to be based on was a VHS-based system, the Project Nemo, and that Hasbro created it.
Yeah, kind of like a Dragon Slayer type things that they were going for, perhaps.
Yeah. And I had no idea about a lot of that stuff. But then that Rob Phillips' girlfriend left him because of the game. And that... the whole reason why he created Cats and Dogs was to change his image because, I mean, up until that point, before Night Trap, he's the guy that everyone knew for Missile Command. Yeah. Missile Command is one of the greatest Atari 2600 games of all time.
Yeah.
So then he gets attached to Night Trap, and now his name's like somewhat tarnished.
Yeah.
And now he's like, screw it, if I'm going to be known for the most controversial game of all time, I'm going to make the cutest game of all time. And then Cats and Dogs goes and sells like 40 million units. So it's just like one guy's like redemption story.
That's awesome. Yeah,
so
that's awesome.
That to me, and I remember when I confirmed Night Trap and I put it on the Facebook page, like, oh, Night Trap confirmed, people like, why? Nobody cares, blah, blah, blah. And now...
It's like, well, you're going to care.
But now the book's been out for like a year, like for like 16 months now, and universally, like everyone tells me that's the chapter they like the most.
I love that. I love that there has been kind of like a rehabilitation of Night Trap over the past 2 years. Limited Run Games released it. They had the remastered one.
That was the thing too. Yeah. So I'm writing the chapter. Yeah. And my manuscript is due in like 2 weeks. So now I already told you guys, Mark Turmel is holding me up.
Yeah.
The guy from Doom is like disappeared. And then they announced the limited run remaster of Night Trap.
Yeah.
So now I'm doing those two things with NBA Jam and Doom. And now I contact the Screaming Villains who did the remaster. Yeah. And then I interview them for the book.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to get it in because...
You feel like that has to be the complete
that's
story.
That's part of the story, you know?
Yep. And then they told me that, it's in the chapter, that they had to recode Night Trap from scratch because the original source code didn't exist.
Yeah.
So that's it is Night Trap, but it's a brand new version of Night Trap.
Exactly.
So...
And it's the part that I am most interested in, kind of like the rehabilitation of these games. It's kind of reframing the narrative around this game, which is something that you're doing with ET, for example. And I think that it's really necessary. I love that you're talking about games like Road Rash, games that, players have a lot of fond memories of, but they're not necessarily talked about nowadays.
Yep.
And maybe even these games could get a sequel because of the, regain popularity.
Sure.
Through the book or through other mediums.
You know? And it's like, I feel like the book's done well. It sold well. But I really feel that like once book 2, 3, 4 come out, people are going to go, oh, there's another book in the series? And I feel like 20 years from now, people are going to go, oh, that guy was on to something.
Yeah.
You know?
So was there a chapter, was there a game in particular that you feel like you hold very close to your heart, that you were very fond of, and you were like, this chapter is the one that I am most proud of, like, is the one that I really, really feel good about?
Let me just look at the chapter list really quick, because there's a ton of them, but I'll just give you like one or two.
Yeah.
I would definitely say the NHLPA 93 chapter, because that was like the first hockey game that I actively like fell in love with. I love that game. Yeah. And then Wasteland, because I love the Fallout series.
Yeah, and Brian Fargo has been very open about his experience with Wasteland.
So, and I'll tell you guys, it was like, it was Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
And I'm wrapping gifts, and I'm sending out pitches.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, you know how cool it would be to get Wasteland in this book. So then I just go online and I find Brian Fargo's Facebook page.
Yeah.
And I message him. And he literally messaged me back like 15 minutes later. And he's like, I'm Christmas shopping right now, but I wanted to let you know that I'm totally down to do this.
Yeah. And it's so cool because
my God.
he's a guy that basically already established his career. He's a legend in the industry.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to work anymore.
Yep.
And he's just willing to just put it out there.
Yep.
I love the fact that Brian has really come upon a bunch of podcasts and he started doing a lot of interviews because his whole time at Interplay, everything, that happened during that time period, he's just putting it out there
It's so funny
to be
too,
preserved.
So many people would kill, so many developers would kill just to have Bard's Tale on there.
Yeah.
But then he has Bard's Tale and he has Wasteland.
Yep.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Well, I mean, he's the guy that greenlit, the Fallout and all the different D&D games that came out during that time with BioWare, etc. I mean, the Black Isle games. Yeah, it's absolutely amazing, you know. So he's a guy that, he, even now with the Kickstarter for Wasteland 2, they're coming out with Wasteland 3.
And I loved Wasteland.
And Exile Entertainment, which is the company he founded after Interplay, they just got bought by Microsoft.
Yep.
So now you're going to get, the backing of a Microsoft to do your games. I mean, hopefully they don't get like the rare experience, and they get more of like.
But even the name of this company, like In Exile, because he acknowledged the fact that like he was in exile.
Yeah. And it's good to get developers like this to open up about their memories and about their past. And so, was there a game, beyond Night Trap, which you mentioned, that maybe you didn't appreciate before, but after doing so, you were like, you know what? Voodoo Vince is actually a pretty awesome game.
I just want to say for the record, I love Voodoo Vince.
A lot of people love it. We were talking about this yesterday. That's a game that came out during the waning years of the platformer and the character-based platformer, and the fact that it got a remaster tells you a lot about it. It wasn't
backwards compatible either. That's because of the code. But I would say 2 games that I really grew appreciation for. Gabriel Knight, Sins of the Fathers.
Yeah.
I think it's just an amazing...
So that was the sequel, right? Or was that the original
I'm pretty
one?
sure that's the first one.
That's the first one, because you had 3 games. You had the first one. The first one was the one that was character sprites, and then the second one was FMV
fully
based.
FMV, the second
and then the third one was 3D, which has an age as well because of the polygon graphics, etc. So Sins of the Father, it's a very cool storyline. It's a very different feel.
And the thing is, because Jane Jensen's a novelist,
so
it's like you have a novel type story in this game, but then the voice acting, you have Leia Remini, Tim Curry, Mark Hamill. And you have
it was a great time because you had all this character
Michael
actors.
Dorn.
All these character actors that were just like, sure, this is the future. We're gonna do this for this video game. And like Tim Curry shows up in a bunch of games, or you have
Tim Curry with the Louisiana.
Never be. So you have Gabriel Nye, like the Tex Avery, or I think Tex Avery games. And you have other games like, who was this guy? The guy that played Doc. In Back to the Future, he had Christopher Lloyd. He was on Toonstruck. You know, it was just people like to shed on FMV games nowadays, but
some of them are really good.
But some of them are really good, and some of them have really good stories, and they really deserve to be revisited.
Absolutely.
So, Gabriel Knight, was there anything there that you were just like really, interested in getting to know more about?
So Jane Jensen met her husband through that game.
Oh, yeah?
He did the music.
Oh, awesome.
Wow.
So that was one cool part of the story. But then, too, there was like a problem coding like the voiceover work, and they almost lost it all.
Oh, wow.
So that's like one of the most redeeming qualities of the game. They almost lost it. I love the story. I love the cover art to that game. Like, there's a guy getting hung. Like, that would never get done now.
Absolutely.
Another game, The Fireman.
The Fireman.
I mean, that was one of the other Japanese developers that I got. And the thing is, he's not even in video games anymore. He gives mountain tours in Canada.
Wow. So it was a Japanese developer then, and he relocated to Canada?
And he relocated to Canada.
So were you able to speak to him in English, or was it? Yeah. Okay.
And he's freaking great. He took a picture of... He bought my book, and he was holding it, like, with the mountains in the background and stuff like that. Like, whenever I'm having, like, a shitty day and it's, like, raining, I just look through those pictures. Like, the other day, I was really tired. I taught 4 classes, and I came home, and my daughter didn't want to go to sleep and stuff, and then my wife fell asleep, so I'm like kind of up all by myself, and I'm like, I have to write the Years of War chapter today. I need to get it done today. And I just started looking through my pictures, and I found a picture of David Crane and Gary Kitchen holding a copy of Boy and His Blob and my book, and it's like, thanks for keeping history alive, and I ended up staying up like 3 more hours in bed that chapter.
It really gives you that extra bit of fuel. Even when you're at your absolute lowest, you just say, I'm doing something good. I'm doing something that's going to matter.
Mm-hmm.
And so the fireman is interesting because we have a friend of the podcast, Rick. He goes by Ash Event, and he's a firefighter. And he's, I think, the only person that has tried to collect every single firefighter game
There's not a lot
out
of
there.
them.
There are not that many.
Yeah.
It's like Roscoe McQueen, you know, whatever. So well,
Fireman is so good, though.
yeah, but the fireman is really good because that was one of the first fireman games, you know, on a console.
And the
so,
fire is actually like a fucking character in the game.
yeah, and it kind of set the stage for a lot of other firefighter games of exactly what were the rules and what you could do.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was interesting because that's not a game you hear a lot about.
No, because it never came out in the United States.
It never came out in the United States, but it has a cult following in the United States.
That's one of the reasons why I wanted it in the book, because of the cult following.
And a lot of people first played these games through emulators.
Yep.
You know, that was how because they were like, oh, I didn't know this existed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's interesting. Were there any strange requests that you got from, you know, besides like Shoplifter, you know, telling you I can't talk about Shoplifter? Were there any other strange requests that you got from developers that were like, I don't want to talk about this part? You know, it's like I broke up with my girlfriend around that time, so I don't want to mention any of that.
Not really. I mean, I will say that like one developer, I sent him questions. And I won't reveal his name. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No, it's fine.
No, that's fine.
We don't want you to shit on anybody here.
Some of them, but I sent him questions, and then he says to me, "You know, Pat, from the sound of these questions, it doesn't sound like you knew what it was like to be a developer in 1987." And I'm just
But that's the point.
yes. So then I'm like, yes, that's the point. I was 4. Like, I think people would be interested.
I knew a lot about baseball, but I didn't know about being a game developer.
So I was just like, holy crap! Like, do you understand like why I'm trying to talk? Then he kind of got it, and then he asked me if because he was contributing to the what's it called to the book, if he was going to get a free copy, and I said it's not up to me, it's up to my publisher. And I ended up arranging for like 95% of the people to get free copies of the book, but I had to bust my publisher's chops because, you know, nobody wants to give away free products and stuff like that. But away from that, you know, no, not really. I'm just looking through and I'll tell you guys a fun story. So I interviewed Matt Thorson for the book. And if you know who Matt Thorson is, he did Celeste.
Yep.
Okay.
So I love Celeste.
Celeste is a great game.
But he also did Towerful.
Yeah.
And Towerful is an amazing game too.
Yeah.
So he gave me some great stuff for Towerful. I love that chapter. But then what happened was he was working on Celeste at the same time that he was answering me.
Yeah.
And he just like went radio silence on me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Matt, I need the release. I need you to sign the release so I could put you in the book.
Yeah.
Because and the thing is, after I finish a chapter, I always let them read it.
Yeah.
Because I want to make sure we're on the same page and that it's something that they believe in, because I want them to promote it. I want them to say, I'm in this book. I believe in this book. I believe in this vision and stuff like that. And that's why I try and get them copies of the book, take a picture with it. Like, it's branding. That's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he just disappeared.
Yeah.
So now I'm like, oh my God. If I don't get Towerful in this book, I'm going to be pissed.
Yeah.
So it's like I messaged him on Steam. I messaged him on LinkedIn. I messaged him on Facebook. I messaged him on Twitter.
Yeah.
I messaged him on Instagram. Like, we're talking like 5 to 10 times on each of them.
And this was already after you had gotten the interview and everything.
And
you had already written the chapter.
Edited, and he approved it. And, and it was like a week before the book was supposed to come out, and I'm already dealing with Mark Turmel.
Yeah.
I'm dealing with Doom. I'm dealing with the other stuff that I told you about, and I'm just like...
Yeah, I noticed some gray hairs here. You know, I think those... that's the Mark Turmel hair.
Yep. Oh, my God. And then he sent it back to me. And that was just like... It taught me a big lesson, because now, like, if you look really quick, I know you don't want me to move stuff on the table.
Yeah.
But, like, see chapters finished. If they're bold, that means that, like, they're complete. So, like, see, release is completed.
Yeah.
So, like, the sports book isn't finished yet, but see, like, release is given to, everyone's answered already.
Yeah.
So, like, I learned so many freaking lessons from the first book. Like,
Oh, you kind of have to take your licks. You have
take
to
your licks, but then, like, as soon as, like, you interview them, write the chapter as quickly as possible so they don't see that they see that you're not fucking around.
Yeah.
And they go, oh my God, this guy is working his ass off. Then you're like, I need the release.
Yeah.
Right away.
Yeah. So it's now, so the ball is on their side already.
Yeah.
So is there, in your experience, I know you talked a little bit about how you've also worked with indie developers and interviewing them and stuff like that. Is there a particular sort of, is it easier to get interviews now with indie developers than it is with these older developers that maybe they aren't as used to, you know, talking to people about stuff like this?
That's a great question. You're awesome. One of the issues that I would say that I've run into repeatedly with some of these older developers are no one's going to care.
Yeah.
And I go, oh, man, bro, are you kidding me?
Yeah. Like,
are you kidding me? Like,
sell yourself a little bit more.
I've basically had to, like, verbally back rub some of these guys.
Yeah.
Where it was like, dude, you sold, like, 6 million games.
Yeah.
Like, people
totally care. People still talk about this.
You know? And they'll be like, really? Like, are you sure? I'm like, yes.
Because I've been talking to my therapist for a long time because I feel worthless. Well, it's I have a cure for you.
I'm telling you, things to that nature where it's just like they're like, well, you know, I wasn't sure that anybody really cared about that anymore.
Well, it's crazy. I feel like because we're all in this hobby, in this community, it feels insane sometimes that, you know, you talk to somebody who clearly like hasn't kept up with it, like doesn't, you know, it's not part of their life. So they're like, oh, I guess this is a thing that happened, and you sort of look back and you're like, dude, this is like part of this whole thing. Like, there's millions of people across this country that, you know, go to these conventions, make these YouTube videos, these podcasts, write these books, like, and it's crazy to think like some of these people don't realize like how big it is now.
Yeah, it's funny to me because it's like I come across different types of people that read that read my books and stuff like that, and I go to a lot of tournaments and stuff, and I'll hear people talk, and I'll go, that's not one of my readers. Yeah. Or that is one of my readers. So, like, I was at a convention, like, last year, and they were having an NHL 94 tournament. Yeah. And these two kids are playing, and this one kid's like, why can't I get in a fight in this game? I remember fighting in this game, and the other kid is just like, you're an idiot. There is no fighting in this game. In 93, there's fighting and blood. There's no fighting in this game. They took it out. Da-da-da-da. And I'm like, that's my reader. Yeah. That guy's not. Yeah. You know?
Exactly.
So, but you want to make that guy your reader. Like, that's why. But I think that's why the book
sometimes
works.
you don't.
Sometimes they don't want it.
They don't just want it.
And that's the thing.
And that's another difficulty that you touch upon, which is that many younger generations are just not interested in reading, and they just want to see it on YouTube. It's like, you know, digest it for me, chew it, and digest it, and then present it to me in a pretty format with a lot of pictures, a lot of colors, a lot of video, and maybe give a loud voice here and there because I wanna hear you really yell and scream at the mic.
It's the truth,
and it's unfortunate, and it's kind of an uphill battle, and it's kind of like a very thankless job in a way.
And people go to me, they're like, Pat, why aren't you on YouTube? You know, you could do some voices, you could do this, you could do that. And I'm like, because I don't want to be. Like, I have, like, videos and stuff that I put on YouTube on my site, and I do some gameplay videos, but I never put myself in the corner and stuff. I'll just talk about the game for a couple of minutes and da-da-da. But it's just like, that's not what I want to do. Yeah. You know?
And it's always a cost-benefit analysis. The same reason why we don't do YouTube. It's kind of like, how much could I put into this? You know, but how much will I have to expend on it? And is it worth it? Yeah, exactly. You know, and you don't want to damage your brand. You don't want to damage your reputation. Sure. Yeah. And so you don't want to put something half-assed out there. So, you know, for a lot of people, YouTube is their main platform, and they're dedicated to that. Yeah. And, you know, God bless them. They do, you know, their work, and they're professional about it.
One day, YouTube is not going to exist.
And that's the difficult part about it. That's the part that worries me, because YouTube is a video format. It's more difficult to preserve a video because a video, you need something to play it back. The only thing you need for a book is to print it. Yep. And when you print it, we're still finding things out from 2,000 years ago. Yeah. You know, I always think about the alien civilization that's going to come and join us, and they're going to see this disc, and it has all the knowledge in the world, but they don't have a DVD player.
Well, see, that's the thing, too. When I was doing the Night Trap chapter, Rob Phillips said something to me that the video game industry's biggest issue is that it's constantly obsoleting itself.
Absolutely.
And he said that, like, the sad thing is that in order for his kids to play his games the way that they're originally made to play requires so much energy that by the time you get to that point, they're not going to want to play it.
I mean, something like this change from CRT to LCD TVs, etc., and to plasma TVs. I mean, at that point, light gun games already obsolete. There's no way to play them unless you have an old TV that they're constantly being thrown out into the curbside. And it's a real problem. It's a real problem. Let's shift gears a little bit. What is, when you talk to the developers, you know, maybe they were not involved already in the game industry, and you thought, man, I really want to see another game from this person. I really would like to see something else. Like, for example, with Michael Meinheim, he worked on the Mutant Football League, and that was kind of like his mulligan, essentially. Yeah. But were there any other...
It was more like, not even his mulligan, it was more like his fuck you. Yeah. Because, like, Mulligan insists that, like, you might want to take it back. Yeah. He totally believed in Mutant.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Maybe it was a portion of words, but I was just saying, it's okay. It was his way of going back into the well. I haven't played the new one.
It's so good.
Yeah.
It's Blitz.
Yeah.
It's Blitz with like those crazy characters.
Yeah.
And with like, I mean,
But you know what it's missing? It's missing a Patrick Hickey voiceover.
That would be
So
awesome.
that would be pretty awesome.
I actually know two people from another podcast that like they befriended Menheim, and they were made like grunts in the game.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So they love that.
Oh,
But,
wow.
But what other developer? I mean, the one that you were thinking, I mean, you're not in the video games industry right now, but there are so many great ideas. There are so many great things that you could do that they're just not being done. Because that's always a part that we frequently talk about it here on the podcast, particularly with Japanese developers, that there might have been great developers that just disappeared.
Oh, yeah.
And for example, like the person that did Castlevania, he was talked of like this genius, and he just disappeared from the face of the earth after like 1992.
Yeah.
And you think about what could these developers have done if they had stayed in it? So let me ask you, what was the one that you would have most wanted to see?
You're awesome too. So Richard Rouse, the guy that did The Suffering,
Okay.
he was working on Church in the Darkness.
Okay.
As I was interviewing him for The Suffering, and Church of the Darkness just came out on Switch. It's really cool. It's like being stuck inside of a cult and trying to escape. It's really cool. Like Jamestown, whatever. It's really cool. So I was happy that came out. But so I don't think I've ever said this before, but Howard Scott Warshaw, I think, was completely ahead of his time.
Yeah.
I think like the concepts that he tried to create in like Yara's, E.T., Raiders, the Atari 2600 software just wasn't capable of pulling off any of the things that were in his brain.
Yeah.
And I think now, if he used some of those wild ass ideas in his head with like today's technology, he would be able to do something amazing.
Yeah.
But there's also the element of some of these people that have not been in video games for a long time, you know, are they able to adapt to this new setting?
That's the thing too.
And that's the difficulty. And they may feel some intimidation to get back into it. They say, I don't know what these kids nowadays are doing, you know, and I don't know if I'm capable of leading it. One of the things, for example, that I was talking with Arnie about yesterday is, you know, Warren Spector.
Don't lie, you don't talk to Arnie.
We do not speak. We've been entirely silent this whole time.
You know, Warren Spector, who you
Warren
interviewed, he's someone that's also very much into the preservation aspect.
Yeah.
He's at University of Texas, and he's doing lectures, etc. And there, you know, Texas is doing great things with gaming. They're trying to preserve history, but you know,
New Yorker.
Yeah, and he worked on Underworld Descendant, and Underworld Descendant was on Kickstarter. It got terrible reviews because it was so glitchy, it was so buggy, you know, and it makes you wonder, you know, are these developers able to keep up with the times, or it's just do they have the culture that it's now required in order to manage such a large team? Because when they were involved, they may have been managing a 20-person team.
Absolutely. Now they're managing 500.
Yeah,
exactly.
Think of it this way: it's like being a video game developer is no different from being an artist, being a musician.
Yeah.
So when you think of great musicians, or being a professional wrestler, when you think of like Hulk Hogan, the wrestler in the 80s, right, ripping his shirt off, yellow and red tights, blah blah blah, you know, all of a sudden, late 80s, early 90s, nobody wants to see Hulk Hogan as a good guy anymore.
Yeah.
So he kind of goes off. He's in a couple of crappy films and stuff, and then he comes back, and now he's Hollywood Hulk Hogan.
Yeah.
Now he's a bad
And now
guy.
he's a heel.
Yep.
Yeah. And then he totally reinvented himself.
Yeah.
Then after that wore out, then he was away for a little while. Then he came back to the WWE, and then he was like a combination of like both for a little while.
Yeah.
So he ended up being able to adapt. Michael Jackson, away from the kid touching, was a great musician.
Yeah.
The king of rock, pop, and soul.
Yeah.
You know, you listen to every one of his songs is almost like a different genre.
Yeah.
So the thing is, for a video game developer, I can think of like a couple that have been able to transcend the industry.
Yeah.
But several of them were only good on one console.
Yeah.
Or
You know?
one genre, or you know.
So like, I'll give you guys an example. Tony Barnes. So you guys probably don't even know who he is. He worked on the Desert Strike games.
Yeah.
He worked on, he was the lead designer of Buffy the Vampire Slayer on Xbox.
Yeah.
What else did he do?
Was that now by the Collective, I think?
Yeah.
California-based team, I think.
Super talented guy. He did Medal of Honor on PS3.
Yeah.
So, but like, and he worked in the industry like 10 years before Desert Strike.
Yeah.
So it's like he's been in the video game industry for
And he's been
40
able to
years,
adapt.
And he's been able to adapt and sell
And
millions of copies.
we talked a lot about this on the Technosoft episode, because Technosoft, they knew how to do great shooters in 2D.
Yeah.
And then they were forced to adapt to a 3D era. And so many developers got killed, you know, in that transition.
So many developers were actually learning 3D as they went along.
Yeah.
So it's like in the adventure book,
It's like being forced to learn a new language every single time. You know, and even being forced to learn a new set of skills every single time.
we'll see. And then this is the thing too. We'll take it to the next level after this is like Die Hard Trilogy on PS1. They were learning 3D,
And it was a fantastic. I love that game.
Yeah.
It's not a great game,
three
but
tech
it's
demos
yes.
put into one that work great.
Exactly. So they were just like, well, you know, we're just going to cover all our bases. We're going to give you a shooter, we're going to give you an adventure game, and we're going to give you a driving game.
And it worked great.
I love it. And that's the reason why people remember
The
it.
chapter, you'll love the chapter then when it comes out. What was the other thing that I wanted to say?
And you also had the chapter on Fighting Force, which started out being a Streets of Rage 3D game. And everyone talks about wanting a Streets of Rage revival. And now Lizard Cube, who worked on Wonder Boy, the remake,
also interviewed.
they're now working on Streets of Rage 4. And you know, it's good to know, and it's kind of general knowledge that started out as a Streets of Rage game, but it was good to get to know more about the process, etc., and how that team eventually went on. It was Core Digital, and they worked on Tomb Raider, and they had great success with Tomb Raider, etc. So a lot of...
And before that, they were just doing, like, flight sims.
Exactly.
And then they used that engine, that graphical engine, in Fighting Force. That's why it looks like the characters aren't exactly, like, on the floor.
On the ground.
Yeah, but a lot of
the Kevin Bacon of video game history. Like, I've done this guy.
You're just everyone's connected by 6 degrees of Patrick Hickey.
Yep.
We should just change that whole game up. So just to kind of close things out a little bit, what is a game? Just sticking to your first book, what is a game that you most want to see a sequel for? In that book, I mean, is it Gabriel Knight? Do you want to see a revival of Great Gabriel Knight? What is a game that if you had to just pick one, and you had a genie, and he said you're gonna get one sequel for one of these games, which one would that be?
It's The Fireman.
The Fireman would be
Fireman
pretty cool.
2 Electric Boogaloo.
That would be awesome. That's so funny. Ooh, that's such a hard question. I would say either Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego?
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we haven't even talked about that one. Yeah.
But not like the PC style. Like I would love to see how they would do it on a regular.
Yeah. You don't have to stick to the same format.
Yeah, same different format.
Or they wouldn't have to stuff encyclopedia in the box for you.
Yeah. Or I would love to see like a prequel to like Maniac Mansion.
Oh, that'd be cool.
That would be interesting, particularly now that Day of the Tentacle has been remade, etc. You know, a prequel to Maniac Mansion would be very interesting.
And
I think Ron Gilbert would probably be interested in doing something like
Ron
that.
Gilbert. I love that whole team.
And that's an example of a guy in that whole team, I think, that transitioned. You know, they're still doing Thimbleweed Park, you know, not that long ago released.
Yeah.
I mean, they're still doing that good work.
Yeah. So I guess I'm going to kick it back to the other co-hosts. Paul, what's the game that you would most like to see a sequel to here in the book?
You know what? Before I read the book, it would not have been Night Trap, but I think now it is, because the process of making it and how it's outlined in the book, I'm super fascinated with it, and now I want to give it another run. Because, I mean, you know how it was back then with FMV games. Like, they were all painted with the same brush, and mostly rightfully so.
Yeah.
You know, you guys have heard me poop on Sewer Shark. But now, after reading that, I'm like, yeah, I think I want to play Night Trap again. And I think I want another kind of B-movie style horror FMV game.
Which it's coming back. I mean, right now we have the guy that did Her Story. He's coming out with a new FMV game that I forgot the name for, and I also forgot his name, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I think that FMV games, particularly there's this other game called Last Shift. There's another game called The Bunker. FMV games, there's kind of a niche for them now, particularly because nowadays shooting video is so much more accessible. You can shoot high quality video for very little money. Back in the day, you needed film reel. You needed to actually spend the money unless you were going to go DV, which they were not going to go DV.
Yeah.
And so I think that creates a market where you don't have to create the assets. You could just film people. And so I think FMV games are an untapped format for video games. It's an untapped genre that really deserves a second look, and really deserves someone with a very innovative approach to really take it to the next level. I think this guy that did Her Story, I think he's actually on the right track.
Yeah.
He also worked on Silent Hill, Shattered Memories. And so he's a guy that really likes the psychological aspect of where you kind of just sleuth, through a story to try to find the truth, etc. So I agree with you. I think that FMV games deserve a second look.
Yeah.
Arnie, let me kick it back to you. I kind of know which one you would want to see a sequel to, but
Which one's that?
Bully.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
But I was actually going to say I would love to see Bully 2. Is that's a dream. Like, I love that game. I think it might be my favorite Rockstar game.
I'll tell you guys a quick story. My wife was in labor, and the director of Bully was messaging me on Facebook. Like, oh, dude, I got the answers for you, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of busy right now. But, yeah, he's an awesome guy. But that was just like, Bully, I'll always remember that game because of that reason. Like, my wife is getting ready to give birth to our first child, and I'm just like, not thinking about the book.
Yeah.
And then he just messaged me, I'm like, yes, I got Bully. And then my wife is just like, dilated,
It's like, can you please focus on this right now? Because I'm trying to focus.
But I was actually going to say Road Rash would be probably
Road Rash.
I'd love to see a sequel.
That's mine as well.
Yeah.
That's mine as well. I know Paul is a big fan of Road Rash, so I know that he would also
Road
like
Rash.
that. I mean, right now we got Road Redemption and a few other Road Rash spiritual successors, but I would like to really see Road Rash get the full EA backing.
Dan Geisler is one of my favorite developers in the first book because, like, he takes no shit from anyone.
Yeah.
He's completely badass.
Yeah, and I think that something like Road Rash could sell very well nowadays. I think that if it's marketed correctly, I think that I love the fact that the original Road Rash, you can go into like the bar and stuff like that, and there were all these characters, and you could.
Again, too, I'm so like pissed off about it because I still think like for EA, they don't want to touch it.
Yeah. I mean,
which doesn't make sense to me.
Does not.
And EA has its redeeming qualities, but they any properties that they don't really see a financial gain from, I mean, they don't really try to explore them. But Road Rush would be a fantastic one. Same with Gabriel Knight. I mean, when you have someone like Jane Jensen, it would be lovely for her to come back and, even do a Kickstarter.
Sure.
Because for me, adventure games are a novel in interactive format.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think there is a lot of merit to that. And that's what propelled me to games in the first instance, because there was that extra layer of interaction that you felt you needed.
Absolutely.
And so something like Gabriel Knight, even just FMV, I would love to see that. What's next for you, man? I know you have other books in the pipeline, so just feel free to plug away.
So right now I am working on a comic book with a super talented artist, Kieran Quinn.
Do you sleep?
But no, I probably sleep about 4 hours a day.
Because you also have a kid.
Yeah,
and you also have parenting duties and a wife.
Yeah, and a full-time job.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I actually just got some of the inks back the other day, so I started lettering and stuff like that. We're working on like a 6-page like tease to start pitching out to comic book companies.
Yeah.
So it's basically like if Spawn and the Highlander had a baby. It's kind of like this the whole concept, like heaven and hell, and then like mortality, and like it's pretty wild.
Yeah.
So that there's that. Then I wrote the story for this game called Kroom that is being developed by a company called Orange Door Studios that's based out of Boston, Massachusetts. And
this is for the BioShock Infinite animator.
So the animator and co-designer Pete Paquette has worked on BioShock Infinite, Madden, Overwatch, League of Legends, he's a pro. And then his brother, Jeffrey, is the engineer of the game and the composer. And so it's the three of us making this game.
Yeah.
So there's that. And then the minds behind Adventure Games is coming out this fall. Probably in a couple of months. It's been done for like 6 months. I'm just waiting for them to send me proof so I can give it one more read.
Okay.
So Minds Behind Adventure Games.
So you just to give some information to our listeners, it's going to come out on Amazon and everything.
Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. The best way to buy the book, though, is straight through me.
Yeah.
One, because I make more money that way, and I have a kid to feed. But then the thing is, too, like, I'm sure Paul can attest to this, like, I put cool stuff in your book. I'll write something in there. Like I want to have a relationship with my readers. I'm not one of those people. Like I have easily like 300 people on my friends list on Facebook that just bought the book that I've never met in real life, and I bullshit with them all the time. That's what I want. I want to have that type of relationship with them. So if you go to patrickhickeyjr.com, the pre-order link for the Minds Behind Adventure Games is up already.
Yeah.
I already started. Like I have a guy that bought my first book from Colorado.
Yeah.
And he already pre-ordered the second book. So I already have baseball cards to put in his.
So so just give us a preview. What are some of the games that we can expect in the Mind Behind Adventure games?
Are you ready for this? Are you sure?
Yeah. I'm ready. Hit me.
So Maximum Carnage,
Nice.
Die Hard Trilogy, West of Loathing, Double Dragon, Conker's Bad Fur Day, X-Men Legends, Pitfall, Epic Mickey, Grand Theft Auto.
Oh, nice.
Parappa the Rapper, Keystone Capers, Family Guy, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Monster Boy and the Cursed Kingdom, Strider, Croc. So those are some of the games.
Oh, Strider sounds awesome. You know, and Croc. I mean, were you able to get an interview with
Nick Cusworth, the guy, like the main guy?
Awesome.
And Argonaut Software, those are the creators of the FX chip.
Yeah, the FX
so there's
chip,
a whole story
Star
of
Fox.
how Croc originated. So if you guys know your video game,
it was supposed to be a Yoshi game.
Yeah,
it was supposed to be a Yoshi game. And then after that, you have 2 more books that are in the pipeline.
So I have for spring of 2020, I have the minds behind the sports games, and some of the games that are going to be in that are Rockstar Table Tennis.
That's I'm most excited about that.
I love that game.
I'm most excited about that.
And I want to say Benjamin Johnson, the guy that designed it. He designs like shirts and art now. He's the 8-bit cubist on Twitter. He's awesome.
Yeah.
But SSX.
That's one I would very much look forward to because a lot of people love SSX and there's nothing out there on SSX.
So there's going to be a ton on SSX after this. Mutant League Hockey, RBI Baseball, the original Lakers versus Celtics in the NBA playoffs, which is the first ever basketball game EA ever did. The original John Madden Football, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3.
That's Arnie's favorite.
WCW NWO Revenge.
Yes.
Blitz 2002. The original NBA Shootout for PlayStation. So it's like that. That's
good.
That's gonna be
and then the last
10
one.
Alley.
Yeah. And then the last one
The last one is a shooter book, and that's the one that I'm the least far off on.
Yeah.
That's going to come out in the spring of. That's when. Fall 2020.
Okay.
So right now I have like 15 games that are confirmed, but that I haven't written yet. So the ones that I've written so far, I'll share because anything could happen. So the ones that I have written so far are Revolution X.
I hope you got Steven Tyler.
I wish that would be awesome. But that dude looks like a lady. So Revolution X, Loaded, Turok the Dinosaur Hunter,
awesome.
Gears of War, River Raid 2, and Wolfenstein 3D.
That's awesome.
So I have a whole bunch of other cool
Looking forward to the Loaded chapter.
So let me ask, I know, like...
I love Loaded. Made my grandmother throw up one time, I remember.
You've got plans till 2020, like you've got these 4 books. Outside of that, like, once this series is done, do you want to keep adding to this? Do you want to go somewhere else with it? Do you want to start something fresh, maybe something... not in the same style?
I always wanted to do a pro wrestling book because I love professional wrestling. I actually do some like consultation with a couple of indie wrestling promotions. Like I help them with their storylines and like I talk to wrestlers all the time and stuff like that. But I really think that after the shooter game is finished, I would love to do a Minds Behind the 80s games.
Okay.
And then a Minds Behind the 90s games and so on and so on. Because like this is so much work.
Yeah.
But it's so much fun.
And it's rewarding. Yeah.
And the thing is, I was just talking to somebody before I came on the podcast, and I said, just from these 4 books, we're talking like that's another like 5 or 6 years of like promoting.
Yeah, essentially.
Yeah. So if I plan to do like,
and you're a tireless promoter, man, which I appreciate.
And that's the thing. It's like I want to apologize to everybody that like buys the book, and I'm like, oh, send me a selfie or something like that. But like that helps so much.
Yeah.
Because like word of mouth is like everything, and it's like I whore myself basically on like Instagram. Like I post
sometimes you gotta do that, man.
All the time because. The thing is, I have an academic publisher, and they're great, and they help me sell my book to libraries and stuff.
Yeah, but they don't help you get it to the hands of the gamers.
Yeah.
And the audience that you really want to get it to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I have to do that myself. So like I've had people that have said to me, like, oh, I bought the book. Isn't that good enough? And I'm like, yeah, that's great. Thank you. Yeah. But like, I need you to be happy that you bought
You want to continue the chain, essentially.
As somebody, since you're working with an academic publisher, is there... Obviously, I know that we've sort of touched on this a little bit, but these people that you've already talked about, these games that you've already talked about, are you, and maybe not now, but at some point, do you think you might go back and maybe try to talk to different developers or different people that worked on some of these games and maybe come out with like a second edition or something like that that's a little more expanded?
It's funny that you said that too, because like the Boom Blocks chapter in the next book, that guy, Tomo Moriwaki, he was the lead level designer for Spider-Man 2 on PS2.
Yeah.
But I didn't speak to him for Spider-Man 2.
Okay.
I spoke to the programmer who was the guy that created the web slinging system.
Yeah.
I thought the web slinging system inspired me too.
That's great,
It was revolutionary because you couldn't web sling from the sky anymore. You had to connect to stuff.
Yeah.
And it was open world.
Yeah.
I spoke to him for boom blocks instead. So like, hopefully one day I'd love to do like an expanded edition and get like maybe like another 1 or 2 sources for each chapter.
Kind of like an addendum to it. Yeah, that would be fantastic.
So that would be cool.
Yeah. All right, so that about wraps it up for us.
Yeah.
And I want to thank you once more, Patrick, for joining us.
No, thank you so much.
Anything else you want to plug? Where can we find you?
Like I said, if you go to patrickhickeyjr.com,
Okay.
that has links to like
That's a one-stop shop for all Patrick Hickey
shopping.
stuff.
Yeah, and then on Twitter, I'm at ReviewFixPat.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm on Instagram as Patrick Hickey Jr. So you could just Google me. I'm Google verified.
You're there.
And the thing is, I answer.
You have a presence
I answer
in the internet.
everybody.
Yeah.
And it's tiring sometimes, and my wife yells at me. She's like, "Why are you on the phone?" But
Like, it's my job.
because it's like I want to build a brand, and it's like, I mean, Halloween 2016 is when this all started, when I was just like, you know what, no, I need to do something more than what I'm doing. Because at that point, I was already like, I'm a full-time college professor. I have tenure. I have a job until I die.
Yeah.
You know, and I have a wife that loves me.
But you felt you wanted more.
But I felt like I needed more. And this has been so much more. But then it got me into the video game industry.
Yeah.
And now I'm doing the comics. And it's like, I'm still not done
You're
yet.
still not satisfied.
And like, I mean, just since like February, I started really like taking care of myself. Like I've lost 90 pounds since February.
Yeah.
That's
so
awesome,
it's just
man.
like,
Congrats.
I'm hungry like for life. You know, so I want people that if they're interested in my stuff to ask me questions. That's why.
Yeah. And hopefully, you know, what you're doing inspires other people to go out there and get it and do it.
Yeah. Absolutely. And like we said before, there's so many people that are either doing it and not doing it right, or they just say that they want to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of like the things I kind of hang my hat on is like, if it changes today, if it changes tomorrow, that's fine. But like the book's been out for over a year and it still has a 5-star rating on Amazon.
Yeah.
Good.
And we live in a world where people love to shit on stuff.
Yeah.
And for a year and a half, no one shit on this book yet.
Yeah.
So, you know, so that to me means a lot.
We would all like to take a bow. All of us are going to take a bow to you. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for really doing something that not everyone is doing, and that it's extremely critical to preserve history, preserve memories, and preserve this medium that we love so much. As we have said, we are the Region Free Gamers podcast. This has been Ozzy Garcia, Arnaldo Paris right here next to us, and Paul Ramallo over in the Yukon. And you can find us on pretty much every platform out there. We're on Instagram at Region Free Gamers Podcast. We're on Twitter at Region Free Gamer. And we also have a website now. So if you want to see what we're doing and what is the latest that we're working on, you can always contact us there. On the website, you're going to have pretty much a companion to the episode. So you're going to be able to see pictures, etc., that are going to serve as a supplement to everything that we talk about on the episodes. And you also get original articles. We haven't gotten Patrick Hickey yet to write an article for us, but we'll talk behind the scenes. So this has been awesome. If you like what you hear, again, subscribe to us. Leave us a review on iTunes. That would help us immensely.
Do that goodness.
Yep. And it has been a great time. Thank you, Patrick, once more.
No problem.
And until next time, we'll be here on the Region Free Gamers podcast.
Peace.